don't worry, Loomis, we started late. We're
Someone,
still in the
and we
beginning.
don't know who, accidentally started the stream as public by accident and then had to start a second one as unlisted. We don't. Hold on. We don't know who.
He's on screen.
Oh, damn it.
Hi, guys, and welcome to another episode of... See, my autofocus hates my flipping hands. It's my curse that I'm Greek. Another episode of your favorite podcast, Unresolved Textual Tension. It's me, your host. Somebody commented and was like, why does she call herself host instead of hostess? And I feel like at this point, it's a neutral term. Like,
yeah, it's kind of like actor almost.
It's just a host. Your host, Maria, with my ruggedly handsome co-host, William.
Hey guys, super rugged, super handsome. And what book are we doing today, Maria?
We are doing The Dark Lord of Derkholm by Diana Wynn Jones, because I know the author this time, baby.
Okay, so some backstory. When I was young, loved Diana Wynn Jones. I read all of her bibliography at one point. This is my third time reading it, and I'm just going to spoil right now that I love this book, like unreservedly. This is a great start. Yeah, this is a great start to the podcast. And I really love all of her books, really. And so I was really curious originally to go back and read this and be like, okay, well, how do I feel about it? And what's funny, and me and Maria were talking about this because she also read this actually at a younger age than me, is like, this is really good, but like as a kid, why did I find a story about a middle-aged man whose marriage is falling apart really interesting? Like, it's really good, but like, wow, some of these things went over my head a little bit.
Like, why did I? Because I was reading this now, and I read this in 4th or 5th grade. When I was definitely in elementary school because I got it from my school's library at the time. And I'm reading it as an adult, and I'm enjoying the crap out of it. But I'm like, what did young baby Maria connect? Like, what was she? And so what I've come to the terms with is we underestimate children and what they are capable of enjoying, what they're capable of like hanging with. I also had the distinct pleasure of completely forgetting the concept and the premise and the plot of this, because again, I read it when I was in 5th grade. I've never reread it, and as I was reading it, I remembered like as things would happen, I'd go, oh God, I remembered this happening when I was young.
I remembered almost this entire book scene for scene. I mean, again, I read it twice, but like it was bizarre how well I remembered this book. Oh, it was so good to reread. I loved it. Like literally, I had to do a bunch of editing yesterday for something else, and I was like, can I be done and get to reading this book again? I want to finish this. Like, it's one of the few books that we've read where I've been like, oh, I really want to read this. Even some of the books I thought were good haven't had this strong of a I want to read this factor.
It is like you can gobble this thing up. And the thing is, I say all of this knowing that this book might not be the cup of tea for some people. It definitely is the narration style is an older one, as in it's that third person, slightly distanced but hopping around from character to character, rather than that really close, really personal first person we've grown accustomed to in the modern YA.
Speaking of, this is the kind of why, if you've been following the channel, I've had a bit of a crisis of faith over the term of it, which is that I went in thinking I was YA trash and realized about halfway through that, no, I'm not. I actually don't. YA isn't really for me. But the thing is, the reason I had thought it is because books like Sabriel by Garth Nix, who also was on the channel. Hold on, I got a cough and I don't want to subject you guys to that. Thanks. Books like Sabriel, you're welcome. Books like Sabriel by Garth Nix, and then the Diana Wynn Jones books were the books I was thinking of as YA.
Jonathan Stroud
as well.
The Bartimaeus trilogy.
There's an extent to which you forget the bad books of your youth, but and like that just always happens. You forget the
Philip
bad.
Philip Pullman, his Dark Materials.
They're written in a specifically different way than the torrid love triangle, death competitions, post-apocalypse of the YA of today, who's really like, you know who we're really writing for? 30-year-old women. And like
women.
statistically, I looked up a study. the vast majority of people who read YA are over the age of 24. And it's like, yeah, that kind of makes sense now. But like, this is the kind of YA that I remember, and it's so good, especially in this book.
I remember when I was in college, there was a girl, she was not a girl, she was a woman, who was writing her honors thesis on Twilight's impact on YA fantasy literature. And I'm also the camp that we really vilified Twilight. Like back in the day, people really went for it. Cheap shots, easy to go for. And at the end of the day, let young girls have their dumb romances. It's fine.
No, me and Maria Pistolas, vampire
Listen,
pistolas.
I did not enjoy Twilight when I was young. I read the first one, I read the second one, and I went, oh, no. This isn't for me. Because for me, my idea of a romance fantasy book, like I was more like Tamora Pierce is where I went for that. And not all of Tamora Pierce's repertoire was it for
Well,
me.
what's interesting is I've read Tamora Pierce, and I don't love her as an author, but she writes more in this mode than the new YA.
Yes.
Just the mode of it has changed, even if it's not necessarily the quality. Because I read some of her books and I didn't love them, but whatever.
There is a duology of hers that I think you would like. It is very different than her others, and it has a lot of things. It gives you Kushiel vibes.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's the main character is a
BDSM
spy.
magic.
No.
No. All right. Not interested, but go ahead.
But anyway, and I would like to actually see, as we do this delve into older YA, your opinion about this particular, because it's one of my favorites of hers that she wrote.
So the ones I had read specifically were her Circle of Magic books. I read like
Not
8
good.
of them.
Not great. I read the first 3 and I never went past it.
It was one of these things where I started at an age where like it was good for me, and then as I got older, as I read them, I was like, this is not great.
Her Circle of Magic is specifically middle grade. Like, it's not YA.
Hold on. So Angry Otter says, I honestly feel like modern YA has been reduced YA has been kind of reduced down to an insult to young people. What's weird is I feel like, I mean, that's true, but I feel like the big evolution has been towards trying to nab older young 20s type of people who kind of want a romance book but also don't like love it. And then also on that side, Miss Ellie Snow says a lot of it now just seems to be an excuse to have teenage protagonists having sexy times.
Again,
yeah,
an issue. Wait, what were the other Tamora Pierces you read? I want to know what we're working with.
I think those were the only. There was one about a like dog detective. It wasn't a dog detective. They were named after dogs, but it was like terrier or something like that. But they were
none of those are her great ones. You have read none of the good ones. I've never even heard of that second one. And the Circle of Magic was not my favorite. Like it very much. Anyway, we'll talk. We'll do a sampling. We'll do a sampling. Right. Anyway, but the point is, this book. Again, I read this going, why would like 5th grade, 4th grade Maria be into this? What was she? And I think we underestimate kids, what they can relate to. And also, I think we have like, there's this idea that like people can't relate to stuff if it's not them. Like, what would a young Maria relate to Dirk about? Like this, this father who just wants to create more weird children. Like, what are...
And also that like they kind of grasp bigger ideas in terms of like just the plot of a book, not necessarily like, oh, it has to be this one person. Like one of the things I remember as a kid about Dirk, and this will make more sense as we go into the novel, but that like in stressful times, he tends to start thinking about projects he can do in the future that to like calm him down and not have to worry. And it's almost like he's disconnecting a little bit. I remember that before I read this book because that's something I do all of the time. And even stuff like that, I think as a kid, you can relate to.
Yep. And I think there's enough young characters trying to figure themselves out. This book has a very big cast. And for the most part, I have a few exceptions. It doesn't feel like anyone was underutilized or like nobody's really developed. You really get a feel by the end of it. And the fact that it is not that long and yet it manages to do all the shit it does is really impressive. There is one particular thing I don't like.
It's
And
just
I don't
weird.
know why it's here. And it technically kind of comes up at a later point. It doesn't actually, but you think it's going to come up at a later point again, and you're like, how? Why? Don't I want to look?
It's weird. We'll issue a trigger warning before then.
And guys, this is one of our mid-month Patreon live streams. This is where we pick a book. So our end of month Patreon live stream, the patrons get to vote on the book. It's part of our book club tier perks. And this one, we pick it, and then whoever wants to read it reads it with us, and then we discuss it. We also have some other great perks, like our Discord, which is absolutely fabulous, great times, and just if you are a writer who wants to talk to some other people who want some feedback, there is so many writers on that channel discussing their stuff. There are memes being shared regularly, funny videos, discussions about books, movies, our videos. We pop in on occasion and hold court. It's a great time, and it's a really fantastic community, and it's probably like my favorite part about having this channel. So go join it. Now, Will, let's get back to the book.
Let's go ahead and just tell people what the plot is for people who don't know, because this is a book most people don't know about nowadays, which is a crime prosecutable by the FBI. It's a felony.
It's a felony. This book is tourism / capitalism as the antagonist. And what I mean by that is you start this book and you are introduced to this world, and this world has magic. We got a wizard's college headed up by the fantastic, the old, described as snake-like Karida, who the narrator, let me say this narrator,
excellent.
Excellent. His voice for Karida is like he hits the S's to make her sound snake-like. It's kind of nasal.
It reminded me of what's his face in Sabriel when he does Mogget. Like there's a little flourish at the end to really give it character. And the way he does the griffins is also great. But
and the dragons, and then the way he did the demon's voice was different from how he did Scales' voice.
Great, wonderful narrator. He adds a lot.
Anyway.
But yeah, so this is like generic Fantasylandia. But there's a guy called Mr. Chesney from our world that has opened a portal and is subjugating this world to be a tourist trapped to lead through pilgrim groups, which is like just normal tourists basically to go through.
It's
but
like
what he wants
real
is
life D&D.
Yes, it's like the way I thought of it is like it's kind of a play on the Narnia kind of convention of people from our world going to a fantasy world out of nowhere, but like he's commercialized it and he wants this fantasy world to conform to the tropes of what our world thinks. So like all wizards have to have beards, and like at one point all the pilgrim groups have to be attacked by leathery avians, and the Dark Lord has to have certain kinds of minions and stuff.
He has to have a brooding, dark, falling apart castle. A demon has to be working for him. The elves have to be dark elves. The dragons, like it's just, and so what you have is this world that prior to Mr. Chesney coming in and being like for the past 40 years super fucking annoying, functioned as its own thing. You hear about wizards where all they do and all they learn now in college is magic that will help them get these tours along and facilitate the tour. So nobody is doing anything unique. Nobody is like studying for the sake of studying or for exploration. The dragons have been stripped of a lot of their gold because they need it for other purposes. Everyone in this world, because the tours last for 6 months. So it's 6 months of active tours coming through. Oh, hi, Max.
Good to have you. Good to have you. We started late today, so you actually really haven't missed much.
Yeah. OMG, I thought I was having an episode when they were calling the official mean lady Karida, but Diana Wynn Jokes knows what she's doing.
So querida in Spanish is like beloved, so that's the joke there because she's such a mean. What's funny is even as a kid I loved her, and she's like this mean old lady. So I don't know what as a kid I liked about her, but she's such a great character.
But she's not actually. I love how much she likes Colette. Like,
yeah, that was so cute.
I feel for as a 30-year-old woman with cats. I really like, I vibe with Karina. She's like, I don't want to feel pain. I just want things to go nicely. And she's a fucking bamf. Like, as a kid, I think I love a bamf, you know, like, 'cause she just can
Again,
do shit.
as a child, I really liked her as a character, and it's
She's
hilarious. I
great.
mean, there's so many great characters in this,
Yes.
even bit players. But yeah, so this world has essentially been commercialized and forced to conform to these tropes. It's not a thing talked about in the books, which but basically it's like Hawaii, where they have to play into these tropes of what their culture is like versus what their actual culture is like to get tourists over. One of the things I think that the book, okay, so I'm going to say something and then I'm going to say something against it, which is that I feel like the book could have leaned more into that parallel. But at the same time, one of my problems with this book is that all the problems I have are kind of inconsequential into how well this book worked for me. So I'm going to say a lot of things that sound like criticisms, but at the end, they're all going to be like, but the book knew what it was trying to do and that it got by on the things it was doing really well. Um, which is sort of a weird problem to have, because with like Sabriel, I had a similar issue because it, like, that book just knew what it wanted to be and cut out everything that was extraneous to that. Whereas this book just knows what it wants to be, and the dialogue and the funny descriptions and all of that like make every other criticism feel, to me, inconsequential.
Yes, I agree. This book really, it Will's not right. It knows what it's doing and it is executing that specific thing very beautifully. And you could make arguments on how to have made it better, but it is already so good. It's like putting extra frosting on a cake. Like,
Mm-hmm.
did you need it anyway? Except for that one thing I don't like, which we will discuss. Which I think actively, like, not having it would have taken nothing away from the book.
It's an odd inclusion. Like,
Yes.
we'll talk. It's just the weird one, really bad misstep.
Angry Otter, do you know? Can you
Oh,
guess
sorry.
what the moment is?
She said, I loved how she had a growth moment at the end about the grief, going back to Karita. Yeah, all the characters have like these really nice moments of like nuance to an extent and really like
And little
understanding.
baby character arcs. Like,
Yeah.
there's so many arcs here. Anyway, so yeah.
Karita. The book starts
Korea.
with Karita. This is one of those books like Naomi Novik. Sorry. You can call me a man whore for interrupting a woman. Karita, and okay, so this is one of those books that starts with a massive info dump and yet is fascinating and engaging to read with, because it's Karita in front of a group of different people being like, I've done a study on the tour, and like, it's bad. These are all the letters I've gotten. Bards hate having to lose some of their people in every pilgrimage. The peasants are in revolt because there isn't enough food. This one mercenary captain, is complaining because he can't retire to a farm because he doesn't even have money for a coup. And somebody's like, I think he didn't know how to spell cow. For some reason, that joke right at the beginning just hit me. I thought that was so funny, even though it's so simple. And so yeah, Karita is in front of this council of like wizards and kings and stuff,
and
being
all
like,
the different guilds, and so like members of the thieves guilds there, the bards guild, literally every important institution from this world is there.
mm-hmm.
And she's basically, so what we know is the tours suck, but we don't know. And they were like, and she was like, I suppose you all voted me into this position because you thought I would be able to stop the tours, and I have not, because I can't. And so she's like, so we're going to go to the oracles. And it's funny because the oracles were created for the tours.
Yeah. Yeah, as a trope.
Yeah, as a trope. But they work, like they still work. So she's like, we're gonna go to the white oracle and the black oracle and ask them what would be needed to end the tours. So she grabs a little party. She grabs this one guy who's part of the Thieves Guild, who you think disappears from the book because
And then reappears. Like, there's
yeah,
a lot of Chekhov's guns that are fun because it's jumping between characters. So you'll see something that happened to one character mentioned very casually by somebody else, and it's like a lot of fun in that way.
Yep. Also, Angry Otter makes the point, it didn't feel like an info dump at all, which is the best kind of info dump. And it works because it's an actual meeting to discuss the thing that is the conceit of this world. You learn about the tours and how it's negatively affecting all of these different people through this,
rant.
meeting. Like it's a business. It's almost like a business meeting, or like
Mhm.
it's a board meeting. It's a board meeting to discuss this specific
It
thing. It's
helps
a
too
council.
that the author is very funny. We'll talk about it more, but she's very funny, and also she like what she's describing is actually interesting. It's kind of like uprooted in that it
Mhm.
starts with like an interesting concept, and so you don't mind hearing more about the idea of Fantasylandia turned into a tourist trap.
Exactly. And she really someone described they started this book and it felt like
Terry
Discworld,
Pratchett.
Terry
Yeah.
Pratchett, who also has that witticism that he imbues the things that can often be serious with a sense of like whimsy. And one of the things I said to Will, and this opening really captures that, is this, because it is literally like a council board meeting with a bunch of adults about a tourism issue that is negatively affecting the economy, health, well-being of this land. Okay, that is not a child. Okay, are you going to come on my lap or not? Like,
I went full screen, guys, for audio listeners because Maria's cat is like trying to decide if he should occupy her personal space or not.
he has
A
decided
lot of
to.
this book is bureaucracy,
It is.
weirdly, and it's so funny and actually
Yes.
interesting.
And that's the magic, because what she does, why it feels like YA, despite the fact that a lot of the characters are adults who are kind of dealing with adult things and bureaucracy, is that there is a sense of whimsy, fantasy that is not scary. And there's another term I had for it as well. But
It's
it's,
very British humor.
yes. And it works really well. So yeah, you have this bureaucratic meeting discussing this thing, and she's like, "We're going to go to the Oracle, and I'm going to take you from the Thieves Guild, King Luther, and Umru, who is a priest."
Oh, I remember his character moment from when I was a child, and it's still, as a child, it hit me so hard, the thing that happens to him at the end of the
Yeah,
book. And
I.
like I remembered it this whole time.
It's why I'm mentioning Umru, because it is such a beautiful detail about a character that you think that you don't take seriously, but
Hmm.
his ending is just so fucking gorgeous. Like, oh god, this book ties everything with such a neat
Yeah.
fucking little bows of. I love it. Anyway, and so they go to the oracle, and they go to the white oracle, and they say, "How can we end the tours?" And the oracle is like, "Make Dirk, Wizard Dirk, your
The
Dark
first
Lord."
person you see
Oh
after
yes, you're
leaving
right.
this
The first person you see after
after
leaving
leaving
here will be your
Dark
the
Lord.
Dark Lord, and
And
then they go to the
what we have
Black
to
Oracle
describe, no, what we have to say is the Dark Lord basically runs the basically the whole endeavor that year, the pilgrimage
tours. Yeah,
and the tour, and like nobody wants the position because it's such a shitty position.
you
Like you
have to
have to do all
change your
this
house.
stuff.
You have to get disguises. You have to get evil minions. You have your house needs to look like a citadel. Like, and you are in
You
charge.
have to
And
die at the end of every tour in some
yes,
way.
yes,
Well, or look like you're dying, but yeah.
and there's like 120 tours. Like there is a ton, and they leave. And you also have to make sure the tours are routed so that they never see each other. Because part of it is that the pilgrims on the tours should not know that there are other pilgrims on other tours that are happening simultaneously. It's a shit job. Would not wish it on anyone.
Hmm.
Anyway, so yeah, the first person they see when they leave, and so they walk out of the white oracle, they see nothing. So then they go across to the black oracle, and they go, what do we need to do to end the tours? And the black oracle says, the second person you see when leaving here will be the last wizard guide of the tours. And they're like, okay. And then they leave. And as they leave the black oracle little cave, they see two people coming out of the white oracle having an argument. And who should it be but a humble wizard who keeps to himself named Dirk, and his son Blade, who went to figure out who's going to teach Blade how to do magic, because there's a conflict in the family about whether Blade goes to the wizard
Hmm.
university and his dad's
Or not.
there. Yeah.
Well, because his
um
dad got treated. His dad is Dirk. He's such a great character because, like, all the other wizards think he's kind of crappy, but really he just likes to sit around and experiment with his gardens and his animals, and he's such a good papa as well,
he's
as Maria
such a
would say.
good papa.
Throughout, so one of the things that this book, and we'll talk about it more as we get there, that Diana Wynne Jones, and I remembered it when I read this because again, I've read like 20 of her books. She always has a focus on
Sorry.
You can mute yourself before you do that. Again, we don't have a high enough male viewership that you need to be pandering. So Diana Wynn Jones, she's always interested in families and family dynamics, much more so I found than romance, in terms of like sometimes there is romance in her books, sometimes not, but the primary relationships that grow and give the book weight are family ones, and that especially is in here.
And basically, because
so hold on. Angry Otter says, makes me wonder if Diana Wynn Jones has ever worked in an amusement park. Yeah, that's kind of an interesting thing. And then Angry Otter says, I demand a Griffin child. We'll talk.
We will. So yeah, now Dirk is going to be, and like the people looking at him, like Karita's like, Wizard Dirk, he's useless. What an useless excuse. I just lost a cat for a wizard. And then the other one, oh, I forgot. Barnabas is here. Barnabas is a wizard dude.
Who's a friend of Dirk, and it's kind of like an uncle to his kids.
Yeah, because he's like, no, we can't do this to Dirk. I'm friends with Dirk. What? That's
he's
too
such
much.
A nice fellow.
And then obviously Blade is going to be a wizard guide, and they're like, congratulations, you are now a Dark Lord and wizard guide. And Dirk's like, no, thank you. Blade, transport us home. And so Blade like magics them home. And what you learn is Dirk had been a wizard at the Wizard College who was terrible at most normal magics. He's not really good at translocation spells. He's not really good at transforming things. What he is supremely good at is magical creature creation, and not just creating things that already exist, but creating new things. So he heard that across a really big ocean there are these things called griffins, but they're not over here, and he was like, I'm gonna make me some fucking griffins. And so he takes lion DNA, eagle DNA, and some of his and his wife's DNA, and he makes a griffin. The very first one being a griffin very near and dear to my heart, named Kit, who was originally named Kitten because
and is now massive. He's like what, like 12 feet tall? Or I didn't quite get an idea, but he's just described as huge, and he's gonna grow bigger.
Oh wait, we had someone just join. Hello, everyone. Bit late to the stream, but glad to catch it nonetheless. Hope everyone is doing well. Don't worry, Loomis, we started late. It's
on several fronts.
So you're not too... We're
someone,
still in the
and
beginning.
We don't know who accidentally started the stream as public by accident and then had to start a second one as unlisted. We don't... Hold on. We don't know who. We don't know who.
He's on screen.
Oh, damn it. Well played. But yeah, Kit, funnily enough, he's such a character in that, like, he's not a character you really see a lot, and he's great. And so Dirk has two normal kids. He has Blade, who's like, I remember him being the main character of the book, but he's really like one of the main characters. I think because I was a young boy, I obviously like associated with him the most. And his thing is like, he has a lot of magic, but it's very untapped, and his father won't let him go to Wizard College because he had a bad time with it. And then the other, the eldest child is Shauna, who's going to go to Bardic College. And you know everything you need to about Shauna the first time she's introduced, because Dirk apparates home and tells the news, and she decides she's not going to go to Wizard College, and she strikes
Bardic.
One of the poses. Yeah, one of the Bardic. And she strikes one of the poses she's tend to start striking when she goes, now that she's a bard, and she says, I'm going to stay home with Dad. And like, it's such a great character, like, detail that immediately tells you everything you need to know about her.
And that's one of...
Go ahead.
That's one of the things this book does really well, is all of the characters within the first few moments of you seeing them, you understand what their personality is. I will argue, except for one. Dawn.
Okay, so here's the thing.
Developed Griffin.
There's 5 Griffin children.
Yes.
Which, like, I don't know how you only have 2 humans and then 5 Griffins, but whatever. Basically, there's Kit.
Mara wants to keep it tight, William. Mara wants to keep it tight.
I'm not even gonna say anything. Kit's the oldest. He's the big black Griffin. Then there's Lydia, who is the fat Griffin, who I love beyond. She cooks. She cooks, and she makes godlike snacks. Everyone says, like, she's so good at cooking. And then everybody else, Lydia's so great. One of the things I love is how chill Dirk is, that she's a really overweight Griffin. It's one of the things that I remember as a kid, that like, he's a good father. He didn't like shame her or anything for it. He's just like, later on, he's like, you know, Lydia, you actually were made for long distance, like, flight. Like, you're like, that's one of the reasons you have a slow metabolism is so
metabolism
that
and
you can handle that.
your heart's bigger. You're supposed to be bigger than everybody at like have
But I
your
just loved as a kid that
also
like he didn't shame her for it.
I think Colette's the second
Yes,
youngest. Colette is I think it's
okay.
Kit Colette.
There's Kit, Colette, and then 3 other Griffins that whose names I always mess up, and because they're basically
It's
the same Griffin.
No.
Like it's really hard to remember them.
Elder. Leave Elder out of this. Okay, so I'm gonna do the Griffins, guys.
Okay, all right.
Kit, my big beautiful boy,
Grumpy.
who also secretly has magic and is a wizard Griffin. Mwah, love him. Then we have Colette, who is brown. She's one of the brown Griffins, and she doesn't think she's super like anything. But
Her
she
and
also
Kit fight a lot.
Yes, her and Kit fight a lot. They're the 2 oldest, if I'm not mistaken. And she also is a good flyer, and she prides herself on being heckin' fast. Then there is Lida, who is the chubby one. And then there's Dawn and the good cook. She godlike snacks. And it's amazing that one of the details I love is that everyone refers to the things that Lida makes as godlike snacks.
Yeah. It's like a family thing where like sometimes you refer to things in your family by shorthands that nobody else really understands. And it's like just a nice detail of like how families work. And then there is another Griffin.
There's Dawn. And then Elder, who's the smallest and the youngest Bob. That's the 5.
I think you could probably have cut it down to 3 in that
Dawn
Colette,
is the most underdeveloped.
Dawn, I had the impression that he's male, and I'm not even positive that's true. And he's like the golden Griffin.
Yes,
but those are the only things I remember about him.
There are 2 goldish Griffins. One is the smaller one, which is Elder, and then Dawn, who is bigger and who is beginning to get even bigger. Dawn's thing is, I think, supposed to be connecting more with his father and like coming into his own a little bit, but it's the weakest of the developments. Elder is young. She's the youngest. She feels like when you watch the Peter Pan and there's that young kid. The youngest child, that's Elder. Elder's big moment is getting really sparkly wings and getting decor.
I think if Dawn had been cut, then it would have been easier to remember the Griffins because like he confuses. I know there's a young one, and then Colette and Dawn, I think, are the 2 that I really confused a lot. But the Griffins they have such great characters. They really act like siblings. I also like that a lot of the times the things they're good at are not like combat Griffin things. Like Lydia is really good at cooking. I think it's Colette who's like actually really good at designing things. She loves making stuff. At one point she gets like some Game Boys from the other world and makes like lighting up like chalices and stuff that they need for the tours.
She calls them like gizmos.
Yeah, the gizmos, and the dragons don't love them, even though they have to pretend to guard them like treasure. And so again, and it's great how the character, there's one point where Kit is having to draw up a plan for something, and like Shauna is like, he's pitching it to the other Griffins, and Shauna like agrees instead of fighting, and there's the book says that like everyone let out a breath because they hated it when Shauna and Kit fought. And it's like that's such a family thing. Like the family dynamics feel so real in that like you're stuck in this house with everyone that you love but are also kind of tired of because you're stuck with them all the time.
And it's amazing because it feels so genuine that even though 5 of this 7 siblings are Griffins, you feel the sibling tension and like the butting of heads. There's a point where Kit is angry, and it talks about how everyone kind of tiptoes around Kit is angry because they're trying to keep him from blowing up. And like, we all have a family member that we all have to be careful around to make sure that their like top doesn't fly off, but we love them deeply. And everybody like kind of comes into their own, especially Colette, Kit, and Lydia have the best arcs.
Another thing the book does really well is that a lot of them are really flawed in terms of like they have behaviors that are just like not nice or good, and yet it actually makes you like them more because it feels so real. Like at one point, Blade, Kit, and one of the other ones keep trying to hide from Shauna, who's making them do work, and it's like they really should be pulling their weight, but you're like, they're kids. It makes sense that they would be trying to escape the work and just hang out on their own.
Yeah, and everyone has something that they're kind of dealing with, like Blade Blade and Kit have similar things where they are trying to kind of find themselves. Blade's problem is he is tiny human in a family of like badass griffins, and his one griffin brother can also do magic, and he doesn't know, like neither of them fully know how to utilize their magic. They're trying to come into themselves, and everybody just thinks of Kit as like a hot-tempered like ruffian a little bit, and in the end his arc is he becomes a really good strategist, and he can plan things, and he's got a lot of like gifts for coordination, and you're like, what?
Look at him.
Happen? Look at you
Yeah,
shine,
and
my
he just
boy.
likes being bossy too, and like at certain times that's a good thing though. Angry Otter said the breeding thing threw me off with Kit and Colette. Yeah, because at one point Dirk mentions that he wanted the two of them to breed to build more griffins. The thing is, technically they're not related or even the same species.
They technically both have Mara and his
Oh,
DNA
you're
in
right.
them.
That's
Yeah,
true.
I agree. Angry Otter, I completely agree. I did not like that. I very much was happy that Colette and Kit were like, never. Kit loves to call cops.
Yeah, he does. It's so funny.
Guys, just read this book. Stop. Get out of here, all of you. Just go
The
read
one
the book.
time a YouTuber has been like, don't watch the video.
Don't just read the
Go
book.
do homework first, and your homework is reading this book.
But yeah, so I view them, Angry Otter, as siblings. So I was also, I think it was
Fair.
because like in the wild of animals, sometimes siblings do the do. Not great. And so I think he was, when he was just like, yes, theoretically this will, and then and then like once it was practical in front of him and not working, he was like, yeah, that's fine, because he never ever tries to make another griffin for Kit to mate with. Like he just like it ends. It's done. But anyway, we're spending a lot of time on this family.
The family
Crazy
dynamic
family.
is really important to the
It
story,
is
and it's one of the
so
things that makes the
important.
story work so well.
The other family dynamic we need to talk about is Dirk and Mara. Mara is a fantastic, also kind of unconventional wizard. She's a female wizard, something
But
that
she's much more powerful than him, and Karita like hates that she and Dirk got married because she feels like it ruined her.
Also, Karita used to date Mara's dad, and so she's kind of possessive of Mara.
Yeah, and like she's just like, oh god, like she had so much promise. It's like that's the vibe, is she had so much promise, and nobody can quite tell why they're together. I will say that the relationship between Mara and Dirk needed to be better developed at
Yes. Oh my
first.
god.
That's probably one of the big problems with this book, is they're never quite, we don't really have scenes of them as a happy couple, and for what's going to happen next, we kind of needed those.
Yeah, because there's this idea kind of going into the start of this book that Mara and Dirk haven't been as close or connected as they have been in previous times. And it becomes an issue. Yes, another Mara. Loomis. And it becomes an issue because as the tours come into their house, as Karita shows up to be like, congratulations, you're doing the tours. Here's the list of things you need to do. She kind of starts conniving something with Mara, and Dirk starts noticing a distance between them. And there's literally a point where Mara leaves and is just holed up at her sister's house. And even the children are like, oh my God, I think mom and dad are breaking up. Like, what is happening? And so because we don't have a really good idea of them prior to this conflict, besides that they do argue, because there's a point where Shona's concerned because of a discussion of money happened, and she's like, mom and dad are in trouble, and he's like, what are you talking about? They didn't even argue, like they're fine. And she goes, mom just spent a fuck ton of money to do this thing, and mom and dad didn't argue about it. Are you an idiot? And so it is a foundational thing for Dirk, because he is very like busy, got a lot of things going on, but sad, and just kind of resigned to the fact. He's got the vibe of one of those guys who's like, I have no idea how I pulled my wife. I will worship the ground she walks on, but if she left me, fair enough. I wasn't sure why she was with me to begin with.
Dirk in general is such a normal guy, and that's what makes all the things he has to deal with so funny and makes him such a relatable character because he's just like a dad, and like that's what he's good at. All of his animals love him. Oh, speaking of, we need to talk about his animals. He has a bunch of
Daylight owls.
what is this?
Daylight owls. He has
Daylight owls. He has
sarcastic.
2 flying horses, one of which can't talk properly, and the other of which is like way too puffed up with how pretty he is. He's
His
called
name's
Pretty.
Pretty.
And that's one of the best jokes later with the elves. And then he also has winged pigs who love to play chase around the house. He has friendly cows who he tried to make dumber so that they would be easier to kill, but that actually just made them super friendly. He has invisible cats.
Nobody wants to kill them.
Yeah, nobody wants to kill them. They're just super friendly. He has invisible cats. And then also he has my favorite ones are the sarcastic
geese,
who are like very intelligent, but all that means is that they're very sarcastic and they tend to make fun of humans even though they're not speaking in human voices. They can tell just the intonation.
The tiny man-eating sheep. His goal was to make them timing, and somewhere along the line they started eating meat.
Oh, it's so funny and it's great. And the thing is, they all love him. And like, that's the thing about Dirk is, you know, even there are a lot of moments of him parenting the kids that I noticed that were like, he gives them space or he tells them what they need to hear or he's supportive of them. And like, that's what really sells him as a good father in small ways that I think a lot of books just wouldn't even notice. And it really makes you keep rooting for him, even as all these crazy things happen. It's so great.
It's so great. Anyway, so the tours come to the Derkholm estate. They try their best initially, like
not the tours. It's all of the people
I
who
meant
manage.
the planning of the
committee.
tours. So he tries like they try and make the gardens look more impressive. They try like elongate the house to make it look better, but then the roof's kind of saggy. And basically, there's the initial meeting with all of the wizards who have to do the tours, and then Mr. Chesney. 40 years ago, somehow managed to get a demon in control. He managed to get control of a demon, and this demon basically has most people in its pocket, where if you don't listen to Mr. Chesney, something bad is going to happen. And then everyone that demon didn't control, Mr. Chesney found ways to get control of them. So, for instance, they took one of the elf princes hostage to make the elves do whatever they wanted. They took the dragon's gold. They have the dwarves bringing mountain of gold tribute every year. They just bit by bit started taking control of all of these different groups of people to make the tours happen. So he is just a dick. He's a super monotone and bland.
We meet him here and he's just
toast.
Like flat, scary toast.
Yes.
Flat, scary toast. The new
new tier
t-shirt coming from Unresolved Textual Tension this fall. Yeah, he's a great character because he's just so businesslike all the time, and yet he's really scary to all of them. One thing, again, this is a criticism that doesn't quite land because the book works so well, but I would have liked, one of the things that could have been good is to show more of the kind of ways that he controls them through economics, in terms of like they are the middleman in who they oppress, in terms of like they make money off of the tour, so they're complicit is the word I'm looking for. I would have liked to see a little bit more economic
complicity.
Complicity. I just had the word. But again, the book is not, and the book works well without it.
Yeah, there is a little bit of that, because there's a point in the beginning where Karita says, "Why do we do this?" And everybody goes, "The money's good." And then there's also a point where Dirk gets fined because of Kit 100 gold at the start of the book by Mr. Chesney, and that is a massive sum of money. And he's like, "Where the fuck am I going to get 100 gold?" So there are moments where you see, and then later towards the end, there's this character who is like, "You're going to get a fine, a pretty steep fine." And you're like, so not only do they force these people to do this, they then fine them if they don't do it in the way they want. And nobody really has a choice, because you have to do it because of the demon. And then if you don't do it the right way, you're going to lose money, which is the only positive for doing this.
Well, and you need the money to rebuild all the things that the pilgrims destroy on the way. The only people who are doing well are tavern keepers. And that was like one of the funniest details to me, because yeah, if you're in a D&D group, like everybody stays at the taverns and like they get really rich, but even they're annoyed because there's no good wheat to make barley and they can't actually retire anywhere because everywhere is destroyed.
And so wait, first off, Angry Otter says, wait, why don't you guys have merch? I don't know. I didn't think anybody would really buy it, but
if you want some, leave some in the comments below.
What you would like, because we could maybe do that. Next, Icefellow says, and they never know how to use calculators, so they weren't able to properly report their expenses. Yeah, because the only way you can report your expenses is by using the calculators they give you.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, no, it's at the beginning where they say,
it's math related.
Yeah, I know. So the guy with an A, the one who does the talking for Mr. Chesney, is like, and please remember to calculate all of your expenses on your machine, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, if you don't do that properly, it's not going to happen. And what we mean is people die. Like, random villagers will just get killed because they happen to get caught up where a battle is happening with the Tors. The bards who lead, who were originally part of the Tors, as the like each Tor had its own, each set of pilgrims had their own bard, were getting killed. The countrysides are being absolutely decimated, which affects people's ability to grow barley, which means the tavern keepers are no longer having beer to serve. And it's just this huge, and if you are part of the Tors, so like Dirk has had to completely redo his house. He needs resources. He has to hire people. There's a village near his...
There's a hilarious part where the kingdoms and Umaru, they talk about how they like to hire Dirk because he can make pig heads look like human heads, because they have to have a certain amount of heads on pikes, and they don't actually want to kill people. So like there's a like real cost if they couldn't have him do that, which is like the funny. Or no, one point he has to give skulls they found in the crypts heads, but he hates doing it because the heads just kind of look at him after that like they're still alive. They're not alive, but they kind of feel like it to him, which was just hilarious. There's so many great moments of just really funny things.
But there's also this beautiful moment where in that initial conference when Mr. Chesney and everyone was here to talk about what they wanted the tour to look like for this year, they're like, and that village we passed on the way here is much too big and successful and doing well. You need to destroy it. And Dirk's like, that's not my village. You want me to just decimate that village? It needs to be rubble. And later Dirk goes to like talk to them, and they're already knocking down their own village. And they were like, oh, Dirk, we knew at some point you would get cast as the Dark Lord, so we took precautions and built underground bunkers. We've been preparing for this for years. And they're knocking down their own homes. That is just how accepted and like common.
But two of them need to stay as what was it, like whalers going through the streets, but they need to be skinny to do it.
The poor famished like waifs. Also, really quick, I wanted to point this out because you would enjoy this. So you asked for merch ideas, and Max said, "Ooh, the pistolas as Dawn stickers, great." Angry Otter said, I want a dragon wearing headphones on a shirt. Literally just the logo.
I made that, by the way, in Canva.
And then Max said, with toast versions of Maria and Will. And then, yeah, I love their logo because it is a good logo.
Thank you.
Perfunctory with an angry caricature of Will.
That's cool. We should see if on Fiverr we can get somebody just to do really quick graphics or something like that. I don't know, though, because the thing is, like with merch, you need to order a lot if you want to anyway, we'll talk about it later. But so I want a plush sad piece of toast. That's very funny. That would be so funny. With like the fringe of Tobias's hair being dumb. But yeah, so there's great moments. So in that meeting, basically you get a layout for what's going on. Chesney, you get a feeling for how scary he is. And one thing is that throughout the meeting, none of the Griffins have been talking, and Blade can't figure out why. And he's kind of annoyed because he's like, usually the Griffins don't push the humans out, but sometimes they do, and he feels very left out when they do. And then as Chesney is leaving, Kit drops down in front of him, and he looks massive, just like an absolutely
Even
massive,
bigger than usual.
yeah, and like he looks like he looks at Mr. Chesney, and Chesney is like, move over. And he does it for a minute, and then he flies off mad. And what you figure out, and then and he flies off mad onto the house, and then the house collapses, the roof falls down on him. And so what you find out is like Dirk's like, okay, go to your cabin or whatever, and then he hoses him off and helps him out, and he goes like, okay, what were you doing? And what you figure out is that Kit was gonna kill Chesney. And then he says he looked at him and he was like, I couldn't do it. I don't know how to kill somebody. And it's funny because you're like, yeah, that's true.
But not just that. He made all the griffins play dumb so that everybody would assume they were mindless beasts, so that if Kit killed Mr. Chesney, nobody could get mad at Dirk.
Kit is the best. Kit's hilarious.
It's so cute. And he also he didn't know how to kill him, and he also realized that what
killing is not that easy.
Yeah, it's not it, which is just so sad for what's about to happen to him at the end of the book.
Oh God,
which is
you're right.
I know this is that parallel. This is that moment where he chose not to kill the other person.
This is okay. So this is a thing with Diana Wynn Jones, which is that the book isn't dark, except for the book isn't dark, but it can get serious. There are moments where it's we're not kidding around here. There are very real consequences and emotions going on to what's happening, and yet it never really punctures the funniness, which I think is just a British skill. I don't know. I think it's just in their genetics, their ability to be really wacky and funny, and then also serious at the same time. And the two.
There's a reason I cried at the end of Blackadder, at the end of the very last season.
I've never watched Blackadder.
I know, but it's great.
We should do a watch party.
I think you'd enjoy it. I think you'd enjoy it. I'd love to do
pick pick the 5 best episodes, and we'll do a watch party, and we'll record it for you guys.
It would just be the last season. It's the best season. It is the best season. I will die on that cross, and it's great. Anyway, we gotta go because we're still at the beginning and we have not gone very far.
I think what we should do is basically overview what the plot is and then talk about our favorite moments, because there is a lot that goes on.
So basically what ends up happening, Dirk is in charge, and Dirk is trying to do a really good job. And he actually is, because of his expertise and the things he can do, and because of Mara's abilities. It's looking like this is going to be really good. And he has the griffins, which work really great as scary creatures, but also they're all smart. All of his kids are a bit smart and capable, except for Blade, who has to come into his own a bit. And that kind of takes the longest. I love Blade as the wizard pilgrim. But anyway, and so they start planning, and at the beginning of the planning period, kind of as things are kind of taking off, Karita gets injured and ends up going under a sleeping thing for a week, which is not great because she promised Dirk that she would manifest a demon and a god, because those were two things Mr. Chesney specifically requested. Dirk cannot summon demons. The last time he tried to, he summoned a really, really scary blue one, and it took all the wizards at the Wizard College to send this demon back from whence it came. But then
manifesting a god, everyone's like, that's heretical. You can't do that. And Mr. Chesney's like, we would like it nonetheless, and we will find you, and we'll take away all the gold if you don't do it for the tour as a whole. So one of the things that Dirk has to do initially is he flies over to talk to Umru, the high priest, from the beginning. And this is, again, such a minor plot line, but one that hit me so hard even as a child.
We have to talk about it because it's such a nice, it's a beautiful example about how to take a very small character and a very small plot, but make it emotionally meaningful and to tie into the heart of the story. Continue, Will. Explain.
It does a lot of things. So first, Umru wants Dirk to move one of the battles over so his people don't get ravaged by the battle. And this is a great example of the logistical things, because if Dirk does this, it's a problem. And so Umru at first is using very flowery language, and then he's like, how much do you want for it? How much do I need to bribe you to do this? And Dirk is like, I need money, but I'm not going to do it. I'll just try to do the right thing. And then, which gives you characterization of Dirk. And then he says to Umru, can you figure out if you can manifest a god? And Umru, he's like, this is a hard line for Umru. He suddenly grows very Disney.
Umru will use bribing. He's not above.
And he benefits from the tours too. He's one of the few people. And he's like, no, as a child, as a shepherd, Umru appeared to me once and told
No, no,
me
no. Umru's the guy.
uh
Uh
his god, Umru's
An-
god.
Anida,
Anshara?
and
Anshar? Anshar?
Anshar. I think
Anshar.
it's Anshar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Anshar appeared to me and told me to, I don't remember what he told him to do, but he's like, and
He
you
just
cannot,
smiled.
oh yeah, he just smiled and he's like, you cannot understand how what that felt like. I have spent all my life building temples to Anshar, and yet he has never appeared to me again.
Yeah, just
And
in the hopes. He has literally become a priest in the hopes of glimpsing him
and me
one
of
more.
all other gods built this entire temple to him. And he's like, and now I realize that he will never appear to me. I have grown too pompous and fat. I don't love fat as a metaphor for, moral indulgence, but whatever. And like and it's such a sad moment where he's like, yeah, he's trying to do all these things to meet his God again, but he realizes at the end that like this was not the thing to do to reach that.
There was a
And just put a
reason
pin
he
on
appeared to him as the shepherd.
yeah, and just put a pin in it because we'll talk about how that plot line ends later, and it's great. And so that's one of the things that happens, and then the next big thing that happens is scales, right?
Yes. So Karita is down and out. She's under a sleep medical coma. Dirk's panicking. While that's happening, a dragon comes to collect all of Colette's gizmos. After that dragon flies off, and were like, wow, it was so big. We've never seen a dragon before. Amazing. And then they see another dragon coming. And at first they're like, is it the same one? And then they're like, it's kind of flying really weird. And it's great because there's this point where they keep thinking it's almost there, but it just keeps getting bigger because it's that far away and it's that massive. And the dragon gets there and it is grumpy AF. The dragon's like, where is the Dark Lord? I have come to serve he who is the evil ruler. And Dirk's like, hello, that is me. And he was like, let us do. And Dark's like, actually, I'm a fake Dark Lord. There are these tours. And he's like, you mean a human from another world is enslaving the dragons? My people have dropped so low. And he gets super mad.
One of the things too that's great is that he talks about how the dragons now have affected. Yeah, we'll talk about it in a second. Yeah, how the dragons now have adopted being wise as their like thing. So he can't figure out what's going on because he asks them and then they just look very unhelpfully and melancholy into the distance. And it's just hilarious that like he's so fed up with it because he's an old school like fire and blood dragon.
Brimstone, yeah.
So Isuela mentioned this. So before this, after he went to visit Karita and saw that she was like still asleep, Dirk was like, all right, I gotta try to summon a demon. So he looks through demonology and tries to find a minor demon who's like relatively helpful. And he goes to summon him, and that's not what happens. Instead, the blue demon from his childhood shows up. And like again, for a wacky book, this demon is weirdly scary at times. Like he is like, she really like goes all out with him, and he's like, no, he goes, why did you take so long to summon me again? I like you because you're easy to control and you're not going to be like, you're going to do what I'm going to. Maria's cat is biting her wrist because he's very cute, but also
because he also is a demon.
He's also a demon, but without 3 legs and blue light.
3 eyes.
And he's basically, the demon's like, I'm going to do what I want. I'll show up when you least expect it and it's least helpful. And then he zigzags off. And what we find out later is that he's the one who woke up this new dragon who then came to Derkholm. And then what happens?
Yes. So the dragon is like, he gets super angry. And he's not well. His eyes are glazed over. His color is bad. And he's not doing too hot. And he starts trying to breathe fire at Dirk because he's like, I shall destroy the Dark Lord. And he still fully doesn't understand that Dirk is not a real Dark Lord. And so, but he can't breathe fire. He just starts blowing very hot smoke at Dirk, who is beginning to sustain burns and smoke in his lungs. And then Mara comes and she's in one of her slinky. So a thing to explain is somehow Mara is suddenly going to be the temptress sorceress of the campaign, which Dirk is not happy about because she's glamored herself to look a little bit younger, and Mara's already fine AF.
There's also these hilarious moments because she's wearing skimpy clothes, but all of her children kind of hate it when they run into her. And then one of the Griffins designs her clothes, and Blade at one point is just like very embarrassed. And one of the other people are like, she actually chose one of the like the ones that actually covered stuff up because she knew you were coming, which is just such a funny
hysterical
thing.
Anyway, so Mara in one of her skimpy dresses realizes there's a dragon, comes down and starts yelling at the dragon like, excuse you, sir, and just talks this dragon down. The dragon stops. They rescue Dirk, get him to a healer. He's now in a medically induced magic coma for a couple of weeks as well. So, oh shit, it's the kids. Mara has her own thing to do because what we don't know is her and Karita. I mean, you know, her and Karita are plotting something, but you don't know what it is. Are plotting something in the sidelines, and she's got her own shit to do. And now the kids
and also
are
she's distant from Dirk. She's not helping him at all.
And not seemingly to care. Like there's a point where her kids are like, you have not gone to visit dad once since his accident when he was nearly burnt alive, smoked alive by a dragon. And Mara's really distanced about it, and everybody's like, what the fuck is going on? But anyway, the kids are now responsible for everything. They have Colette now is in charge, or Colette is attempting to hide all of the clues for his weaknesses, because one of the things is they have to plant clues for the Dark Lord's weaknesses at different points. Colette's trying to do that. Shauna, Blade, and Kit and Dawn are now in charge of walking the armies of darkness to the different camps that they have to go to so that they can be parts of the big battles. When they get there, they realize that these armies of darkness are from Mr. Chesney, ostensibly our world, and they are criminals, specifically murderers who have done bad enough shit that they are okay with them being killed. Okay,
and there's like 1,000 of them, and most of them are going to end up dying too. So like this is kind of crazy to begin with, and so they're drugged for the first 3 or 4 days, and they basically have to herd all of these prisoners to where they need them to go. And the thing is that the prisoners are it's dark. It really is like they don't want to do the things. The kids are like, they can feel this mounting tension with the soldiers who also just, you know, they don't love being herded places in the cold without food. At one point they start chanting about their human rights or something like that. And the thing is, the kids just are not equipped to handle this kind of a thing at all. Bartimus, he's Bartimus, right?
No, it's
God,
you messed me up. Give me 1 second. Barnabas.
Barnabas was supposed to help them out more than he did, and he didn't. He also kind of messed up some of the cells, and so they have to create like magic loops to get them moving. And like,
literally, they have them like tethered.
They keep jeering at Shauna whenever she's around. They hate and inappropriately. They hate Kit because he's like the only one of them they're really scared of. And so like it's really uncomfortable. And there's some great, again, Diana Wynn Jones has like these really wonderful little things she describes in ways that you're like, oh, that's a true thing. Like they all start getting snappy with each other because they realize having to teach, like being mean to other people makes you feel mean. And like, again, there's a lot of little insights into human character that are just so accurate that I love in her writing. That I'll try to remember. Maria's cat is extremely cute, guys. Audio listeners, you're really missing out. This one is Pumpkin, I think.
Yes, it is.
Pumpkin's the smaller one, and Marmalade's the bigger one.
No, this is Pumpkin is the bigger one. Yes, This is my biggest girl. She's 17 chunky pounds. She's one of those
she
cats.
Weighs as much as my dog.
Yeah, she loves pats. She loves them.
Oh,
anyway,
pretty.
So and so it's really rough, and things are going really not well. There's literally a point where to kind of in a last ditch effort to deal with stuff, Blade has been periodically translocating back to the house to deal with stuff, and his mother has told him that they're getting the dragon healed up so that the dragon can be because obviously it was sick and it's being a little bit like it's just hanging around. So Blade, in a last ditch effort, because they realize the timeline's off, the troops are going so slowly, they're having such a hard time getting them to move that they're not going to get there on time. And Kit is determined to help and make this happen and make his father proud and like not fuck shit up. And so Blade's like, let me try something. So he goes to the dragon, and we call the dragon Scales. Can you guys not? What's happening?
I've never seen them fight.
It happens. I'm waiting my new feel away, which is this stuff that I use to keep them calm.
They should have one of those for males too. Just in general.
And anyway, and he goes to Scales, and Scales has been like recouping, and he immediately sees Scales is looking better. His wings are doing better. His eyes aren't filmy. He's actually green. He's not black. And he goes to Scales, and he's like, "Hey, you kind of burnt my dad to a crisp." And Scales is like, "Are you here to berate me as well?" And he's like, "No, no, no. Because you burnt my dad, and he is sick. I have now been, and me and my siblings have had to be dealing with these really, really shitty." Soldier people, and they're not listening, and it's kind of not going well. We need your help. And he's like, "Okay, I'll help you, but I'll come to you in like a day." And Blade was like, "Roger." So he goes back. What Scales ended up waiting for is he heals Dirk. He makes it go faster so that Dirk can wake up from his trance. He also wakes him up from the thing. And basically Scales tells Dirk, "I'm going to help you. I'm so sorry. I'd been asleep for 150 years. I was getting ready to die. I'm old AF. I don't know why. I woke up because of a blue light." And you realize, oh, the demon fucking woke up Scales. And he's like, "And I woke up to a world that looks completely different. Dragons are like doing it. I don't know what the fuck they're doing. They're acting real weird. There's this guy everyone's terrified of who's a fucking human. And I'm so sorry. I was not rational, and I shouldn't have done that. So I'm going to help you." And Dirk's like, "Okay." Flash to where the kids are. The soldiers have revolted. And like they're attacking Don and Kit. They're attacking Shauna.
So what happens is they get out, and one of the things the kids have been using to herd them is the carnivorous sheep. And so they get out, and it's basically like a riot. They pin Don's wings down, and Kit can't get to him. He keeps trying to swoop, but they're scared of, but he can't get in there. They keep trying to stab him. And then Blade hears Shauna screaming in the distance, and is like, "I gotta go figure out what that is." And so he tries to go there. He's hitting people with like a stick, but it's not really working. And then above them, like there's a great darkness, and it's Scale. And he shows up, and he just roars at the soldiers, and he eats one of them, which is really cool. Though we figure out later it was an illusion because he doesn't really like the taste of humans. And so like he is able to get the situation under control. He circles around after that, bringing humans back. And even though a lot of the soldiers get out at this point, and you keep seeing them throughout the rest of the book.
Even before that, because by the time they get to the riot, there's 600 soldiers. So either because of death or escaping, 400 are missing. And Scales ends up bringing some of them back. But one of the best part, and Angry Otter mentioned this, so I'm going to highlight it, except it didn't work. When Scales shows up at the camp and starts calling those soldiers scum, and he'll be like, "March, scum!" And you're like, "Yeah, Scales, fuck them up." Tis peak.
Okay, and now we got to talk about this moment.
I don't like it.
Like, it's trigger warning.
Great.
It's weird.
Trigger warning for SA.
It's such a weird thing in a children's book, and it's such a weird thing for the tone of this book, and also because it goes nowhere and does nothing. Blade shows up, it finds Shauna, and Shauna's clothes are kind of like ripped, and she doesn't want to be touched. And she just won't move after that for like a few hours.
And she won't let anyone near her. Because what we should say is like there was just a mob.
Yes, of soldiers around her. And then Scales comes and has her look in his eyes. And then she's like, "Oh, it's still there, but it feels distant." And
like
Scales
it feels like it happened a very long time ago.
Yeah. And Scales is like, "Oh, keep it that way." And it is never mentioned again in the book. And I'm like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, it's such... And I remember this as... So I read this twice. I read this once when I was youngish, I think like 12. And then I read it again when I was like 16, I think. And the first time, I think it went over my head. But the second time, I was like, oh, so she got assaulted, right? Like, I don't know if the full Monty or whatever you want to call it. And it's so weird. It's so weird. I don't know why she included it. If it was an author from that time period, because again, this was written like, I don't know, like 20 years ago. If it was a male author, and this is sexist, but like, I'd have been like, okay, he just included it. Yeah, male authors at that time, this is before the social justice movement really got swinging, like they just wouldn't have thought about it. But like, this is a female author. Why did she feel the need to include this?
And either way, it wouldn't have been an okay thing to include, but at least you would have been like, yes, men back then weren't even remotely thinking of it. But it is a really weird thing to read No, I do not want to call it the full
I don't know what to
Monty. Yes,
call it. I don't want to get
grape. Just grape.
grape. Yeah.
Grape. I agree. I don't.
It's
The full Monty sounds fun.
okay. Fair enough, guys. I don't. All right. Yeah, it's bizarre, and it's like it's not one of these things where it's trying to be realistic. Like, okay, these are prisoners from our world. Blade is a young male. If we're going full realistic here, why does this only happen to Shauna? And if we're not going full realistic, then what purpose does this serve in the novel? Because that's the other thing. It's not just that it kind of weirdly breaks up the tone for a children's novel. It's also like this doesn't go anywhere. There's a thing that happens to her later that's treated as way more traumatic and actually has an
And comes
impact
up
on the
over
plot.
and over again.
Yeah, and so it's like it's really odd that this is the thing the author decides to do, and then Shauna's okay after Scales makes her feel like it's distant.
Like, it is the weirdest, and it is very uncomfortable making. And honestly, if someone would just go and take that part out, nothing about this book would change. And this is one of those things that shows me that this is fundamental. And this is the one thing, the one piece of criticism I will say is valid and would have genuinely made the book better. Everything else, it's great. This is one of those things where you're like, Jones, were you smoking doing that day?
So Max says the fact it never gets brought up again is weird. Maybe the thread was caught up in editing. Maybe there were follow-on consequences to it, but like those got cut for whatever reason and nobody went back to cut the original thing. It could also be a thing where like maybe the publisher was like, this can happen, but you need to cut all of the her talking about it later things. And Diana Wynn Jones was like, oh, I don't have time to go rewrite this and it was important. Like, there are things that it could be that are just like errors, but it is an error.
Yeah, and it's like Max says, like the end was cut, but the foreshadowing never got snipped. Yeah. And then Angry Otter makes the point. Yeah, the rest of the book is kind of uncomfortable when Shauna's there. Maybe it's distant for her, but not for the reader. Yeah, a huge problem I had was that I kept remembering that had happened. And while it was like very distant for Shauna, and then there's a part where like she gets some terrible news and Blade's like, oh, it's as bad. It's almost as bad as the reaction from earlier. And I'm like, don't say that.
Yeah.
Don't say that, my dude. Don't say that. And
it just actually search really quick to see if she says like she mentioned it in an interview or something because it is odd.
It is the weirdest thing, and it was the thing that most blindsided me because I didn't remember it. Like I said, I read this book a very long time ago. I knew I enjoyed it, and then as I was reading it, I remembered it, like things like I remembered the animals, the griffins. I remembered weirdly enough that what's his face was going to be like the king or the like leader of the Thieves Guild, like that he ends up being way more important than anything else. Exactly. Yeah, Angry Otter says super casual about that grape reference, my guy. It's about like how Blade references it. Yeah,
so
super
weird.
Casual. But anyway, I completely forgot this. Pumpkin. I completely
By the way, guys, Max is keeping a cat count in the comments, and I'm gonna highlight at the end how many we get to.
Yeah. But anyway, so I completely had forgotten this, and I was reading this, and I was like, "Yo, why am I dudes? Like, why is this there?"
So
anyway,
weird.
It's the biggest issue in this book. The book would have been way better had this not been there. I don't understand. Anyway, continuing. So that happens once Scale gets there. Everybody. Ooh, you got cat butt too. Look at that. She heckin' chomp. Are you making biscuits now? No, she's laying.
I love the lashing tail.
I don't know. Anyway, so once Scales is there, that army starts moving. He blows smoke. If they won't leave the container, he'll like blow smoke into it because their camps are magically sealed in. If they won't leave, he like blows smoke into it until they start like leaving. And they get on track. They're working. He also like he's like, guys, you have to feed them because Scales can read minds, and he's like, they want lunch. So they start milking the friendly cows that they brought, and then Scales turns it into cheese because he can manipulate time and stuff like that. Fascinating. I love Scales. Another thing that is happening multiple points throughout this, is Scales is commenting about how Blade and Kit should be able to do more magic. And he keeps going, you don't know how to do this? Dragons out the egg got taught how to do this. And they're like, what do you want? Nobody taught us.
And what's also great is that he keeps calling Kit black or Catbird, and like Kit has never met anything bigger than him, and Scales is substantially larger, so it's kind of a great inversion.
It's so great. But yeah, and so he keeps commenting on that. So you kind of get the idea, because something we didn't mention is the oracle that him and Dirk went to see at the start of the book. They were trying to see who would teach him magic. And it was a name none of them recognized. And they were like, that's not a wizard. Who is this? And you're kind of like, ooh, is it Scales? Is because like you get the idea that Scales' name is not actually Scales, but that's what he's telling people. And you're like, is Scales gonna be their teacher? That would be so cool. I love the idea of this grumpy old dragon teaching Kit and Blade magic. But anyway, so they have their first battle. Dirk's awake. He comes and helps them move stuff. They start having to do these things where like the leathery winged avians attack pilgrim parties. They can't make the leather kites work, so they start getting the sarcastic geese.
Yeah, so they try to get, but the sarcastic geese won't go in the hamper that Blade needs them to. And so Dawn lands and is like, you're not doing it right. If you want the sarcastic geese to do something, dare them. And he goes, I dare you that you won't get in this basket. And the geese are like squawking to each other like very madly, and they get in there very grumpily, saying sarcastic things. Again, they don't use words, but I love the way she describes them, like clacking at each other and stuff. That was the moment where I was like, this is so funny, because the geese think they're smart and they're not. They're really manipulable. I just loved it.
It's so great. I love it. But anyway, so they get the geese start doing the squawky attacks. They start doing the battles. During the battles, Kit makes himself look like the Dark Lord. He makes like a shadow appear on his back. Dirk just like
hangs
kills
out
one of the guys. Blade, I really liked the description of the battle.
I was about to say.
Blade is simultaneously invigorated, adrenaline, and he's like enjoying, but absolutely hating the battle. He's watching people die. One of the things that happens on the tours is certain people, like, let's say your cousin is going on a tour and you really don't like your cousin, and you would like your cousin to die in a way that would not implicate you in a world where the laws of your world barely hold any sway. You can pay the Chesney Tour Company a huge sum of money to make your relative, your cousin, expendable, which means at some point during the trip, he will be killed.
By the way, this is far more plausible than you would think. If you want to be terrified, look up at some point how many people die on cruise ships and how there's basically no legal recourse to the whole event, and there's no one to... it's very funny to get a picture of the cat while I'm talking about this, but her cat is majestic. And so, like, this is actually fairly plausible, and it's brought up later that, like, yeah. And because the thing is, going on tours is expensive, so pretty much everyone who goes there has an inheritance somebody else wants. And yeah, I loved the way the conflicting emotions Blade has about the battle, because it's so realistic that on the one hand, it's exhilarating, it's exciting, and on the other hand, he feels sick inside. And Kit doesn't have this reaction because Kit is a kind of a logistical nerd. He loves managing this whole thing and calling conferences. And B, he's up above the battle, so he just sees the big movements of it. He's not really seeing like the moment when a one of the tour members gets killed because he was marked as expendable, and he just gets stabbed through the heart by an elf. Who, to sidetrack really quickly, one of the elves made an insult to his father, and so the guy was like, you got to go serve the Dark Lord. And so he goes, and it's very funny because he's like very princely and ethereal, and he's dealing with Dirk in his home with his flying pigs. And yet he seems to have like a lot of respect for Dirk over time. And more than that, he saw Pretty, who up until this, he's the winged Pegasus who can talk, that Dirk made. And up until this, you get the sense that Pretty is very petty and kind of young and adolescent and rude, and yet the elf is like, I will serve you for a year and a day if you let me have this gorgeous creature. I have always like, and it's hilarious how much he wants Pretty, despite the fact that Pretty's kind of a dick, and it's just a great It's a great moment. But yeah, and in the battle, he talks to Dawn afterwards, and Dawn is like, "Yeah, I had the same feeling. I loved and hated it."
Oh, also, it's around this time that Colette and Lita learn things about themselves because Colette has been trying to hide all of the things. She's a really fast flyer, so they were like, perfect. Colette is the one that will go and hide all the gizmos and the clues. And Dirk wakes up, and Colette's like, I'm sorry it took me so long. I keep having to take breaks every 10 miles because I'm so tired. And he was like, duh, you're a short-term fast flyer. I designed you to do that. You should be taking a break every 15 miles. You'll go better. Stop trying to go longer. And then he's like, well, actually, technically, Lita should be doing this. And then Lita's like, no, I can't. Like, once I'm up, I have to stay up. If I come down. And he was like, yeah, I made you to be a long distance flyer. You have stronger wings. You have a bigger heart. And you were made to have a slower metabolism so that you could stay in the air for fucking forever. And Lita's like, really? And then he's like, listen, for this particular job, are you a little like big? And he was like, but it's fine. Once you're in the air and you're flying around, you'll be fine, girl. And Lita's like, okay, I'll do it. And again, Lita's the one who cooks everything. So after this point, it is hysterical because people are like, who's cooking? When Lita's gone. And so Lita now takes over doing that, and Colette goes and helps everyone. So Colette and Kit have that really positive reaction about the battles. Like they're super pumped for it, but Dawn and Blade don't. They're not really feeling it. And then the next like major thing that happens at this point, like they do this stuff for a while, is it's time for Blade to have his own pilgrim party. Again, he is young. I'm thinking like 15, maybe 14. I think he's 14. And Blade's a special one.
Well, and the other thing that's happened before this is that Shauna, they had a bard come and meet them, and the bard rejected her from, or expelled her from Bardic College. And like, being a bard is the one thing Shauna has always wanted, and it hits her super hard. Like, she's in a depression for like a couple days about it. Again, why this has carry on anyway. But she decides she's gonna go as a bard because, like, what are they gonna reject her again with Kit on this journey?
Yeah. The other thing is to note is there's a bunch of little things going wrong that you're noticing have to do with women. Like there's a bunch of the towns where people are supposed to be are missing. The town is there, but all the people in it are gone. Where are they? Where could you have hidden a whole town of people? The slave girls have revolted. They are no longer being slave girls for the party over in the Emir's palace.
One of the best little moments is that the Emir has to be spelled to be crazy, and this Emir is like, I don't want to do it. I saw what happened to the last guy. He actually went insane. I don't want to do that. And Dirk, early on in the novel, is like, okay, why don't you just act crazy? And later on, one of the like his servants goes to Dirk and is like, something is wrong with him. We don't know. And Dirk is like, oh, this is my fault. I didn't realize he's a bad actor. He's just going around saying very loudly, I'm losing my mind. It's so funny. Again, there's a lot of moments that are just so funny.
It's such a nice callback to like what felt like an inconsequential conversation later that comes back and has some significance. Anyway, the female wizards are all suddenly working for Karita, and you're like,
because they don't have to lead tours. Yeah, they're women. They can't be wizards.
Wizards have to have beards and they have to be men. And so like during the tours, the female wizards normally have nothing to do, but you get this idea that there is this undercurrent of something happening, and women are part of this like rebellion that's happening, and it's messing stuff up. There's a horse lady who's really passionate about her horses not getting mistreated by the pilgrims, threatens to recall all the horses. There's all this stuff that's kind of vague.
This is the scene with, and you actually get explicitly told this in a scene with Karita, where she like literally talks about how she's trying to mess up the tours because she thinks that's why Dirk was chosen, but Dirk is actually doing a weirdly good job.
So she has to start purposefully
screwing it up, and that's why the leathery winged avians didn't work, is because Barnabas was spelled. I don't think it's Barnabas. He spelled them not to work. Barnabas. Yeah, which is kind of funny because it's like the power of family is making this tour work. Like if Dirk didn't have his kids, they wouldn't work. And then at the university during this scene shows up Colette to give a message to Karita, but she's like The thing about it, and the reason Dirk doesn't really like Karita is because she keeps wanting to steal his animals and his children because he's like, I'm not sending you a griffin egg. You're just gonna have it grow up in a basement and be dissected. I don't want to do that.
Yep.
And so Karita sees Colette come in, and she is the most gorgeous creature she's ever seen.
And she's had her eye on Colette since the beginning. That's the one she liked.
And Colette is like the brown one who's like not cool in black or gold.
Or gold. Like she thinks she's the like normal, average looking one of the family. Which is hysterical. And she goes, I have a message from Mom, but I'm not allowed to give it to you until you swear you will not keep me or try to you cannot kidnap me or try keep me against my will or ensorcel me to stay here. And Karita's like, God damn it, Mara, you crafty bitch, you knew I'd try. So what Karita does instead is she tells Colette that she's the most beautiful creature, and Colette looks at her and goes, you think I'm beautiful? And Karita's like, yes, you're absolutely majestic. You're beautiful. And she's like, and they end up exchanging.
She goes like, I'll ask Shauna. Which is such a great thing to say.
And then she goes, like, she ends up going back to, like, her family, and she's like, I need you to get 2 people. And it's during the meeting where, like, the bard guy was there was elves waiting for Dirk, like all of these people were waiting for Dirk, and she goes to Blade, and she goes, I need you to pick 2 of those people you think are really truthful. And it's like I think one of the elves,
it was the horse lady. No, it's the horse lady and the mournful king, I forget his name. Luther.
No, Luther isn't the. Oh, it is Luther. And he was like, she was like, I need you to pick 2 people you think would be really truthful and bring them here. And she goes, do you think I am beautiful? And they're like, yeah, you're fucking gorgeous, my girl. And she's like, I'm beautiful. And like Colette's life, her
and
vision.
The thing is, this is told from Blade's point of view. So for him, it's like inexplicable why she did this. It's one of the great things in the book is something will be set up in somebody else's viewpoint and then paid off in another somebody else.
And it's because he was like, well, yeah, did she not realize she was? And then he was looking at her and he was like, oh, she is really beautiful. I didn't even think about it, like, and it's one of those things where within your family, you don't necessarily pick up on those things about each other, especially, when there's like gold griffins and then the giant.
Well, and you're a fucking griffin.
Yeah. So it's a great scene, beautiful payoff. Love it. Anyway, Blade's pilgrims. Super annoying. There's these people who call each other, tell everyone to call them mom and dad. There is this old couple who are, and originally he thinks they're a couple, but they're not. It's this Karen of a woman.
Very British Karen.
She has, and her hair is like perfectly like almost like a helmet, which makes me think it's a Karen cut, but she's older, like older lady.
She refuses to dress in their clothes.
Yeah, she's wearing, one of the rules for the pilgrim parties is you have to wear the garb of the world. And she's like, no, I am wearing very sensible clothing and I plan to remain this way. And then her brother, what does she call it? What's his name? I forgot. Eldred. And she's like, he's a professor. And Eldred is just like, looking at stuff and kind of spacey. She has to remind him to put his pants on at certain points. And then there is these 2 siblings, Suki and
Jeffrey,
yes, thank you.
By the way, you can tell that I read this at a young age because I remember all of the names. I could not do that as an adult now.
No. So Suki's super annoying. She's attached herself to Blade, who again is like 14, wearing wizard robes. He's given himself long bushy hair, and when he makes his beard grow, there's no hole for his mouth, so they have to cut it in with scissors. Shauna helps him. They have to hem his robes. And Suki is like all over him, and he's like, Blade has not had his awakening to be into women. He doesn't. And
he's so before his growth spurt too.
Yeah, Suki is just like annoying AF. The way she talks seems super vapid. He hates it. And then Shauna sees Jeffrey, and the 2 of them fall heckin' in love immediately. And it's and he's like, oh no, because Jeffrey is marked on his sheet as an expendable pilgrim, which means at some point Prince Talathan has to run him through with a sword. And the other thing is, pilgrims aren't allowed to stay here, and you're not allowed to go to their world, so like star-crossed lovers. And he's like, oh god. Shauna looks so happy, if we have to kill him and or he has to go back to the normal world, she's gonna look as upset as she was the day she found out she couldn't go to Bardic College. And so he's like, oh God, this is a mess. And he sets off. And a funny thing that is set up at the beginning of the book is Blade is a procrastinator. And he was like, I have plenty of time until my pilgrim party to study the black book that tells me all the things I need to do and study the map that helps me navigate everything. I'll do it then. And he never does. And so it's like the night before his actual pilgrim party, and he also doesn't. He just goes to sleep. Like he studied
because they're all so tired.
Yes. And so he doesn't really know what he's supposed to be doing. And then there's also this guy there, who unlike everybody else who kind of looks like they're wearing costumes, there's this one guy that kind of looks comfortable in his outfit. And he's like, oh, are you part of the party? And the guy ends up like scribbling his name on it. Rebel. Mm-hmm. It's Revel. And he's like, my name's Revel. And then he sees his name written as a last minute addition to the
and
party.
What you figure out, basically, we might as well say now, is that he is the leader of the Thieves Guild that we saw back at the
beginning.
Which is like, again, there's so many small anvils that are dropped in Chekhov's guns that are set up. She's really a masterful writer in that way. And what you find out is that he steals from the Pilgrims. Like, watches are so good. And so he goes along with the Pilgrims to get the tape recorder that the Karen is using and some of the other stuff. And what's hilarious is at one point, he's like, Blade is like, look, I won't tell anyone if you get Suki off my back. Because Suki is like flirting with him and he doesn't like it. And Rebel's like, God, you don't want her? And Blade is like, he can't. It's so inexplicable to him that anyone would actually like Suki. Which is so funny. It's such a kid view of things. And so after that, him and Suki are like, get along really well, Rebel and Suki. And you find out later that Suki has like a little bit more to her going on in terms of she's very smart. And so basically what happens is that his Blade's pilgrimage goes on for a little bit, but it almost immediately goes wrong.
The bandits that were supposed to attack them when they were being accompanied by merchants never show. And what they realize is the escaped prisoners are fucking shit up. The bandits were, and again, they're fake bandits. They're supposed to be attacking the pilgrim party, brutally flipping murdered. And he's like, oh crap, danger. And the problem with Blade is Blade, when he translocates, just has a sense where things are and he can get to where he needs to just by that sense. And he thinks traveling by foot works the same way, where he doesn't need to look at a map. He can just sense his way. He can't. He has no sense of direction. He's not following anything. Each camp that they go to has food in it for them to eat. 3 days go by, they found no fucking camp, and the one camp they do find is one from last year's tours, so the food is still like edible but stale. And you're like, my dude, get your shit together. And so this pilgrim party, the avians, there's no avians that show up and attack them. Nothing is going well. They get super fucking lost. Eventually they get to a point where they're so lost that to get to any of the other places would put them behind or super ahead of schedule from where they currently are. He's off the map of where they're supposed to be. And then
the other thing is he's under pressure because they know that some of the pilgrims write notes to tell Chesney how things went or not. And so he's like always, he's like, oh God, I got to keep to the schedule and not make any mistakes if I don't want to lose this or that. And so then eventually what happens is that, and you kind of figure this out from Dirk's point of view when he goes to figure out what happened later, but basically they get attacked by the escaped prisoners, and him, Revel, and Suki, basically he tries to translocate them away, I think.
Well, no, Suki has been kidnapped by the bandits. Okay. And then they're trying to he's trying to get to the bandits, him and Revel. So he translocates him and Revel, but into the middle of the stampeding. So poor Blade just gets smooshed by horses going by because he translocates in the middle of their moving party of people. So Revel has to he wakes up. I'm debating whether to show you this aggro. No, we're gonna continue. This
gotta focus. Gotta focus.
Yeah, gotta focus. And he gets smushed. Him and Revel are like, okay, we've got to go after those bandits. So Blade has just left the party, and it's just Shauna, Jeffrey, there's this weird thing where if Blade tells everybody, okay guys, we have to hunker down for the night, people will be like, we don't want to, blah blah blah, and then Jeffrey will be like, guys, let's camp out for the night, and everybody's like, I'm sad. Nobody tells you to sit down.
And Blade hates it. Jeffrey like is weirdly charismatic all the time and like such a good dude. It's one of these things where like you don't really get a huge feel from him. You're not super close to him as a character, but you do get a feel for him.
Yeah. And it's funny because when because Dirk hears that Blade is missing, and so he goes to find the party of Shauna and everyone, and he was like, okay, just take your party. I should mention they go to Mara's house at one point, but anyway, Blade tells Shauna, just take the party to my house, like to home, and we'll just figure it out there. You guys are off course enough that that's what we have to do. But he sees that Shauna and Jeffrey are a little, and he was like, oh God, that's one of the expendable ones. I'm going to have to deal with this at some point. But then he has to like go try find his son. And so he searches for a while. He can't find anything. He ends up telling Scales about it and to try see if they can find out where Blade is. Anyway, Blade, they're tracking these guys who aren't doing anything because you remember, you as a reader and Blade as well remembers what happened to Shauna. So Revel and Blade are freaked out about what could be happening while Suki and you are like, oh my God, Suki, I'm so sorry. And then they get there and it's just Suki tied up, like sitting in the middle. Everybody's away from her, but they're all sitting around her and she's like chained to like 4 different people, but nobody's touching her. And she's just like, this isn't going to help you. I don't know what you think. She's just talking smack to them. And eventually, like, all the horses get recalled by the horse lady, which ends up slowing the group down and means they have to toss a bunch of their resources, which helps Blade and Revel out, who have been just following them and have no food. But eventually, they end up rescuing Suki. And then they start following this other band who have captured prisoners to what looks like a rock face, and there's like a spell on it so that they can go through this tracks, like almost like a mining tracks with like the trolleys, and they go in and they're like, that shouldn't be there, so they end up sneaking into this as well. And what they realize is Mr. Chesney is carting off barrels of something to his world, and Revel is like, he's not a member of the Thieves Guild. Only the Thieves Guild is allowed to steal shit. We have guild laws. And he's like, we have to figure it out. And they go into one of the barrels, like that of the things that are being carted off, and it's just dirt. And they're sitting there, and because there's this point where they see the demon, the blue demon, because the blue demon spoke to Blade earlier, and Blade has a specific, like, he can sense when the blue demon, he's had enough experience with him where he can sense almost immediately before anyone else that the blue demon is nearby. And so he tells the blue demon is like, they are stealing my food from these mountains and shipping it to their world. And they're like, oh God, what do demons eat? And everybody's like, I thought they ate souls. And they go, and it's dirt, and they're like, Suki is like, it's just, some tiny bits of and this it just looks like soil, and you're like, Suki, why do you know the composition of this dirt? And her and Revel are in love, and originally Blade is like, no, she's vapid, she's probably tricking you, she was trying to get with.
It's so funny because when Revel saves her, him and her kiss really passionately, and Blade is just like, ugh, and he walks off. And it's so funny because in another movie, this is the point where the lovers reunite and have their passionate kiss, but you're getting told it from Blade's point of view, where he's like, he's prepubescent, he's like, ew, and just is like really exasperated with them. Yeah, it's great. What I love about it too is that Suki and Revel are like, they're in love because they're both kind of smart and canny and not great people. And like, that's their connection, is not just like that,
they're
like,
hot.
They're both hot. Yeah.
And it's great because you believe it, and because like she ends up being way smarter, and she's like, this is wrong. But anyway, so Blade ends up figuring out, because they're just looking at, it's just dirt, there's nothing in it, there's no ore, there's no like anything, and he goes, oh my God, our world, everything is made up of magic. They are literally just taking heaps of our earth because it has our magic in it. They are Revel is like, this shall not stand. And then there's a chase scene when somebody sees them and they're running through the hall. And then who does Blade stumble upon but Barnabas, a man who was like an uncle who helped raise them, who you realize has been working for Mr. Chesney also working for Krita this entire time, and has been helping run. So they're using, number one, they're using slave labor where they're capturing people from this world, just like random villagers, people. they're capturing them and using them to dig up the earth and transport it. And the only people being paid are Barnabas and some of the overseers. Besides that, this is absolute like slave labor, and that nobody knows about, that they're keeping secret. And Barnabas is like, it's just dirt. And he was like, you're taking our magic. And Barnabas is like, it is true. They use it. It doesn't last very long, but they use it to power their cars and machinery. It's fuel. They're using it as fuel, but it's only short-term supply. And eventually, Blade's like...
Well, and what I love too about it is Barnabas is like, yeah, eventually there'll be a problem for our world, but we'll be dead by then. And this is why... Okay, so a lot of times when there's a twist villain, it doesn't work and it feels stupid. But with Barnabas, it really works because he is so unattached to it. He's not even like a cold sociopath. You can just see that a switch flipped in his head, and like Blade isn't a person now. Like he's not he is able to disconnect his humanity from... Shut up. God, I am an English major. All right. I swear. You can tell because I can't do math. Dehumanize Blade like immediately. And like it feels very realistic to how people actually do this.
It's also hysterical.
Yeah,
it also is hysterical because he has a drinking problem, and he's like, I had to fund my drinking problem somehow. Because you have long since stopped thinking of Barnabas as a good character. He keeps fucking shit up. He keeps getting drunk and messing things up. And so you believe that this kind of bumbling idiot who seems to care about nothing more so than getting his next round of alcohol in a world where, as we mentioned, beer is expensive because there's not enough barley being grown to support the fucking beer economy. So it's more expensive. So he needs to feed his alcoholism habit. What a way to bring back that small comment you made about not being enough barley and tavern keepers having a hard time.
So many Chekhov's guns that go off in interesting ways.
Great. Anyway, so they ship Blade off. He's to this place called Costamara. And it's basically like Roman Colosseum
I thought of it as
fighting.
Yeah.
Where they were like, congratulations, Blade, you are now... And Blade's growth spurt happens in this tiny little box he's being carried in.
Okay, I never got that even as a kid. Is there some magical component to it? Because like it happens really fast. Growth spurts don't usually happen over a day or two.
They don't. I think that it's supposed to be magical.
Okay, that's how I took even it. As a kid, I was weirded out by that.
Yeah, because it's funny because he connects it to Mara being like, "Oh, don't worry, you'll shoot up before the end of your 14th birthday," and he's like, "I did in one day."
Dear viewers, do you notice this one hair of mine that will not go down? It's so annoying being Hispanic.
But yeah, Angry Otter says, you think they're just saying random stuff because it feels like random stuff, but it always comes back. It's one of the beauties of this book. Again, the him mentioning the comment about Mara saying he was going to shoot up before his 14th birthday. Again, tiny comment, and then it comes back with him growing in this thing.
So basically, what they're going to send him in.
Oh, we have to mention something. During one of the
you're right.
Battles, yeah. This is super important. During one of the last battles, Pumpkin's like, pet me. What are you doing? Look at her. She's watching my hand. Are you gonna?
She's like, I don't get it. I'm just gonna sit here like a fat Garfield.
Yeah. Anyway, during one of the last battles, Dirk has this sense that something is wrong with the spells on the soldiers, and he can't tell. He keeps looking at it. He gets Barnabas to look at it again, and he can't figure out what it is. But anyway, they're getting ready for the battle. A bunch of the forces of good are missing because some people just like didn't show up. Again, slowly, people are just not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And as the battle starts, again, Kit plays the Dark Lord during the battles. He makes a fake rider. He gets really big. He's flying up. And then Dirk looks, and a bunch of the soldiers, the evil troopers who are convicts from our world, are pointing their arrows at my boy Kit. And Dirk like manages to stop these sets of arrows, but then he hears a thwang and he turns, and there was another set of soldiers who are not bespelled, and they shoot, and it hits Kit, who immediately turns back to his normal size. There's no rider on his back, and he's got 2 in his chest and 1 on his one wing, and he just falls into the lake. And Dirk is just watching basically his eldest child. I'm pretty sure. Well, I think Kit and Shauna basically came out around the same time. Like Kit hatched, Shauna was birthed around the same time. Anyway, but one of his eldest children just fall, and he goes, because up to this point he keeps going, they're too young, why am I having them do any of this, they're much too young to be responsible for any of this. And then as he'd been coming to that realization and like thinking that, and like, I can't believe I got hurt and they had to step up and do this, he just watches Kit fall to the water. And then chaos ensues because people are like, the black soldiers who were evil just killed the Dark Lord. Then there are these mercenary guys who just start fighting everybody, whether the good or the bad people, and it's just chaos. And Dirk realizes all control has been lost. So he grabs the remaining children and people he loves that are there, and he calls Prince Talathan. Again, Prince Talathan has to, like we said, work for him for a year and a day so that he can get the horse pretty. And he has Talathan magic him away home. And he just holds up. Dirk goes, he is full on grief. He manages to get Colette, who, by the time he gets Colette, is bloody. Colette is just covered in blood, but he realizes it's not her blood, so he's not super concerned about it. And what you learn later is Kit, who is the sibling she has argued the most with in her entire life, gets killed, and she kills the people that shot those arrows. And you're like, oh shit, because this is the first time any of the Griffins have actually killed anyone. And Dirk is having a ton of grief, and everybody is trying to like comfort him. Dawn is
He's living with all of his flying pigs who like being scratched,
on
but
the
also
terrace.
making a mess.
He takes a bunch of tables and chairs and he makes himself a hut on the terrace.
There's also a bunch of dwarves who have been there dropping off tribute who like just keep trying to cook and feed him. And then the only thing he'll eat is that the elven prince will show up every once in a while with like a really hot elven woman who will give him food. And he's like, it tasted so delightful that most of the time he ate it before he realized he had. But like he has hardcore grief. The only thing that gets him out of it is when he goes to talk to Colette.
Because Colette hasn't been eating and they're like, she's even worse than you. And when he gets there, Colette's upset at herself because she's not sad about Kit dying. She just kind of feels nothing about it. And Dirk's like, it's fine. You guys argued all the time. It's fine if you don't feel that I'm sad enough for both of us. Please just eat. And she was like, go away. And that's what he's been telling everyone who came to talk to him. He's like, my own medicine, I see. So he crawls back into his pile. And eventually Colette does come out and she's like, I'm sad now. It happened. And he's like, oh, it's okay, Colette. But
and she's like, I'm sad. I have no one to argue with now.
Exactly. Who am I going to have sibling fights about? And then
Karita shows up.
Old Fran first comes back because I think she's called Thin Fran. It's something. But Fran and Lida would fight back when Dirk was because Fran was supposed to be taking care of Dirk, but Lida wouldn't let her anywhere near him. And Fran comes back, sees the pigsty Dirk is in, and goes, I am getting Mara. We are dealing. Dirk, get your butt up. And so she makes Dawn go find Mara, who is off, has been away this whole time. And Dirk's like, Mara's not going to come. And Fran's like, just watch. And then she's like, get up and go get showered before she gets here. And he's like, no. And then there's this guy named Old George. And she's like, George, get the hose. And Fran literally just hoses down Dirk. The pigs fly off. Dawn is a mess.
Before this, though, back when he's in the deep depression, Karita had come to visit and tell him, like, hey, things aren't going correctly. Because the thing is, he has blocked off this almost from this house from reality. This is the portal for the pilgrims to get back to our world. And so there's a bunch of pilgrims there. We didn't mention this, but for a while, the pilgrims had been showing up there and he had been pretending to die in a pit. But now there's like
in the pit, the portal would open.
Yeah, now there's a bunch of people who can't get home, and he does not give two shits. So Karita comes in. She's like, this is happening. You need to let them go.
30 pilgrim parties in the valley outside your fucking house.
Yeah, and he's like, I don't care. My son is dead.
Yeah, and then the guy from Mr. Chesney's representative, Mr. A, I forgot what his full name is, and he's coming and he's like, you'll have to deal with fines. That is 300 people we've lost. And he's like, lost? You want to talk to me about loss? My dude, my one son is dead. My other son is lost. Both of my daughters are lost. Like, get out of here. And Karita
My wife has left me.
My wife has left me. And Karita realizes, oh, fuck. Oh, no. I didn't do a good. And you realize that whatever has happened between between Mara and our
Dirk.
boy Dirk, Karita's had a little hand in. And Karita realizes that she's been coming and berating a man stricken by grief because she didn't know that his son had literally died and that a bunch of his children are missing. Lita is also missing. She was supposed to put all the things, like all the clues around, and she should have been home by now, but she just hasn't come home. And so he is just absolutely in grief. And she's like, she realizes there's a point, and it's a really pretty line where she realizes she's dealing with real grief. And that's not exactly how it's phrased, but it's this moment of her being like, oh, I need to take a step back from my plans and what I've been trying to do and realize that my actions have actual consequence on the people around me. So she ends up going back home she goes to talk to Mara, and I think partially to deal with what was happened with Mara. So then
back to Blade. So Blade's gonna go into the Coliseum and die, essentially. And when he gets there, he finds who but Kit.
He's not dead, thank God, my Griffin baby boy.
Yeah, but his wings have been clipped, and he's not looking too great.
His
and
one
so
wing is broken.
And the thing is, if they don't fight, they'll get hit with fire. And so they're like, let's do Griffin dance. And or
they were
fake
like,
fight.
Fake fighting. That
which
we
is
used
what
to
they
scare
used to do as
mom with.
kids. Yeah. And then they do Griffin run too. And we kind of figure out what happened to Kit, which is that he got washed down river. And there was a fisherman who, that's another thing we didn't say, is that there was a guy who guided Blade to go up the hill. And that's when he got captured. And there was a guy who said to Kit, I'm sorry about this, but you need to learn. And we figure out that Kit has eaten 4 people or killed 5 people. And the last person he tried.
It's 3 because Blade is his fourth fight with a human, but 5 lions.
Yeah, and 5 lions, and he's like, it just isn't fair. They deserve to live as much as me. I'm just bigger. And so you think they're gonna have to die or get eaten or whatever, and then who shows up but Scale?
Oh yeah, I should make him on the way to Castamara, in the little cart that Blade is hunking around in. Lita finds him. Lita has been on vacation. She's just flying around hunting.
She likes being able to fly. I always think of her as making like really healthy snacks. It doesn't say that, but I like to think that like she was like, oh, I get to like hunt things and make food out of it because she's a chef. And you know how like when chefs get healthy, they like they start cooking healthy. I'm talking about Maria here. You both know how to cook and cook healthy.
Yes,
so,
I do.
Yeah, that's what I thought of. But yeah, and so she hadn't been able to get him out, but he was like, go get help.
And he doesn't even say that. She tries to break the lock. It like sparks flames. She flies off, and he's like, God, is Lita alive? But you get the idea that Lita realized she couldn't get him out, flew back home, and lit some lanterns.
Well, so what happened?
She found Scales. Yes,
it's weird how much I remember this book, and I remember it from my first reading. Like again, I did not forget this book. It's really odd with how bad my memory is. Yeah. But anyway, remember Scales had been trying to find him, so she found Scales, and Scales comes and grabs the 2 of them and takes them out and saves them. And what's funny is Lydia is like the one Griffin Scales likes. He's very chuffed that she likes him. Yeah,
and
which
Little
is like
likes him. And there's this one point where she's like, don't take him seriously when he talks all angry. I think dragons have to keep an amount of anger, but it's all fake talk. And you're like, aw, they hunted together. Like
he's like, she's like an excellent hunter. And again, it's one of these things where like it's a paragraph, and yet it adds so much detail and richness to their character, and it's a great moment. And Scales is mostly just really irritated that Kit and Blade both have so much magic and couldn't do anything with it, and they were just dancing around like idiots
out of their situation.
Yeah.
So he
flies back to Derkholm with Kit and Blade.
And so Lita has already gotten there first. Dirk is so happy to see Lita, and she looks amazing. Mara comes home and like is hugging Colette, she makes Dawn smells like a pigsty. So she's like, Dawn, go bath, and he's like, okay. And then she finally hugs Dirk. Like she hugs all the kids, and then she hugs Dirk, and she's just got her arms around his chest, and she's like, I'm so sorry. I didn't think it was going to be like this. I'm so sorry. And then Karita comes and to say sorry. And what you find out is that again, we mentioned this. Karita was trying to make sure the tours really sucked. Dirk was doing such a good job. She started having to fuck things up on her own. But initially, her plan had been to make him distracted. So she put Mara under a spell to make her leave Dirk. So Dirk would be so emotionally distraught that it would ruin the tours. But he ended up throwing himself into it because of that. And it had a huge impact. And she was like, and she'd been using the wizard women, the lady wizards, to sow dissent.
One thing we mentioned is that Mara can create pocket universes, and so that's where they've been hiding all the people from the cities to make the pilgrims less effective.
Yeah, and so nobody, like, they weren't sacking villages and stuff like that. And that's why, like, the slave girls revolted, like all these different groups, because Karita was working in the background making all of this stuff happen, which is just great. And she basically apologizes for how her meddling affected their family. And it's really great. And then Colette and Dawn come, reunions, and then Shauna and the Pilgrim Party finally get there. Shauna is exhausted. Jeffrey is also there, and like her Pilgrim Party just sets up, and she's like, I hope you don't mind that I brought my pilgrims in. We came around the back, and they're all sitting there, and everybody's like eating, and then eventually our boy
Kit and Blade.
Oh no, wait, Lyta doesn't come back yet. She comes back, I think, at the end with Scales.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. I think it's at the end of Scales. Anyway, but Kit and Blade come back, and it's such a nice scene, and everybody's so happy, and they're hugging. There's this beautiful discussion of like them all attempting to hug each other at the same time, and how, because the thing that was mentioned at the beginning was Blade saying the family didn't have a lot of family feelings, like familial feelings. And he was like, here it is. It was there. We just didn't know it. And so it's this really cute scene. But then a bunch of people start appearing. Like the elves are there. Some of the Karita's there. The demon pops by, and Scales undoes the entire like magics, keeping everything out. So like the 300 pilgrims are starting to come in, and Scales is there, and then the demon appears.
And Scales and the demon do not like each other at all.
And they're like posturing, but also Scales is wearing this, like, he'd always been wearing this like banged up circlet, and he had this weird chain trailing off of his body, but it's been polished now. Oh yeah, it was with Colette. He was with Colette because she can do the finagling, and she fixed it. Yeah. Okay. So he has a like collar going, gold chain going from each shoulder, and he's wearing a thing, and you realize that this ain't just no normal dragon. He is the king of the dragons. All of the other dragons in the kingdom have been waiting in this valley. And him and the demon, and you find out this demon has been trying to take down Chesney because his mate, the love of his life, is the demon Chesney has in his fucking pocket. And there's this point where Scales was like, get out of here, demon. And the demon's like, you don't want to say that. You need me here right now. And he like waves a hand thing, and a portal opens, and Scales was like, oh, you were keeping him back, because what you realize is Chesney has been trying to get into the world this whole time, but Blue Demon has been holding him back. Chesney comes in, and he is like, none
of this is going correctly to plan.
He's more like, you all are going to face incredible fines. And then he points to like a group of the pilgrims, and he's like, you come here. And then it's like two other, like, it's the mom and dad pilgrim, and like the
so we get a couple of revelations about Blades. First off, Jeffrey is his stepson, I think it was, or son.
No, his son,
who he doesn't like at all and had marked as expendable. Suki is his daughter, who he really likes,
and who wasn't supposed to come on this pilgrim party.
Right.
Jeffrey did it on purpose to fuck with dad, and also because Suki wanted to come.
And it was interesting at one point because he's like, you don't want to stay here. They're all uncivilized barbarians before I got here, which is a theme I wish the book had maybe gone into a little bit more. But again, it's hard to criticize this book because it's so good. And it just wants to be what it wants to be. We figure out that the Karen lady was actually from the Missing Persons Bureau. people keep going missing, and he's like, speak to my lawyers about it. Mom and Pop had been, I think the IRS essentially was
Yeah,
Pop,
the
and Mom
one.
was
Well, no. Pop is. Oh yeah, Pop is IRS. Mom is. What was she? No, I think she was tax bureau. He
tax,
was.
like, yeah, it's something like that, where it's like, yeah, you're getting
Yeah.
a lot of stuff from this world that we don't think is correct.
Yeah,
And
and
so,
he's doing insurance fraud based on the he charges exorbitant fees for their insurance, but then
oh
stuff
yeah,
happens and it's not getting paid out. And then that guy is another. And so it's basically enough people on their side of the universe realize there's something fucked up happening with these pilgrims that they sent in undercover artists to
we
go on
also
the.
figured out that Eldred, the Karen's brother, who like was very simple-minded, is the elf brother that
It's
Talion
the
had
elf
what they were using to
prince.
control him. Yeah, and
And
he had,
he.
go ahead.
No, you go.
No, I was gonna say, and the reason the dragons aren't getting fed enough gold is because he had been the one who sketched out how much they needed, and he's like, "Look, it was just I didn't know. I just made the best guess I could of what I told
Yeah.
him it wasn't accurate."
And he had enticed. What happened was he enticed Eldred to go to their world by saying, because Eldred was a scholar and really curious, by saying like, come and you can see cool sights. And then he just kept them there. And what ended up happening, because Talithan is young and gorgeous, but Eldred is like heckin' old, he lost his magic and thus began to age and forget who he was. And it's only by being here, because there's a point where Blade looks at him, and the only one who seems to be doing really well on the journey of not having enough food, not getting to the proper camps and anything, is Eldred, who is looking better than he has this whole time. And so Eldred has come through, so that thing has been tied up. And so they're all arguing, and Chesney is like, listen, talk to my lawyers. You'll find everything is above board and fine. Oh, and then the one person was like, yes, and what do I hear about this mining operation? You're bringing things back into our world without, basically customs.
Yeah.
And using slave labor, and not paying people. And Chesney's like, talk to my lawyers, Suki, let's go. And she's like, no, I'm marrying this guy. And he was like, why would you marry him? And she goes, he's a thief, that should make you happy. And it's her being like, I know you're a thief, you buddy. And then Revel goes, I don't say this often because I don't think it's important, but I'd like to say that I am the richest man in this world. My father has been, my father
He's
was
the hereditary
previous,
heir to the Thieves Guild.
and it's like, man, Revel, you've been out here getting real excited about watches, my dude. Anyway,
And so basically what happens is that, and Scales like roars at him, but like they can't really do anything because he has the demon in his pocket. It's massively powerful. And so what happens is, and this is a great moment, because the way Karita had gotten injured before was that the pigs and Beauty and I think the geese and the dogs, they like to play tag. And so it's basically a stampede that goes through Dirk's house every once in a while. And so Karita goes to, it says Revel, like, try to get in his pocket. And he's like, I need a distraction. So she's trying to plan one, and then just through the house come all the pigs and the dogs and Beauty, and
being herded in by Colette and Dawn.
Yeah, and that's when Revel gets the pocket. He gets the demon in his pocket, and then
and Karita's like, oh god, I'm gonna have to. She's holding it, and she's like, I have to break this thing that it's in, and she's like, it's gonna take all of my power, and then this unearthly stillness appears, and suddenly the gods are around them. Anshaw, the god of Umru's people, is there, and Blade recognizes him as the fisherman who led him in the right direction. Kit recognizes him as the guy who got him out of the lake. And then the dragon god is there, the Karita, like everyone's gods are just there.
Show up. And Umshur is like, look, we couldn't manifest before this because you guys didn't really want the pilgrim.
Ask us. You didn't
ask. Yeah, and what happens is that basically he's like, okay, Chesney now must live as he made the demon live for 40 years in like a little pocket, essentially. And, the demons can now go off on their own. And like, we're going to now, I don't think they're going to close the portals. I seem to remember them leaving the portals open or something
No. So the portals had everyone had been able to open portals before, but Chesney made it so only he could open and close portals,
right?
Which is why they would only open at the end to let people through after Dirk had been fake killed. But now any wizard can open a portal. So the idea, it feels like, is that the wizards on this side, like in this world, it used to just open portals, and somehow Chesney got in, captured this demon, and did some finagling. And so you basically get the idea that like it's going to be a little bit more free, and now like Suki and Jeffrey can stay.
Well, and what Ansher says too is that, you know, now you guys are going to have to live as you choose instead of as the things he molded you into.
Yeah, you need to rebuild your world.
Right, as you would organically like it, which is kind of a theme that would have been interesting for the book to expand on, is how this world was before all of this and how it got twisted into what it is now. Again, though, the book is so good and it's so lighthearted that it doesn't necessarily need to have deep, incisive points like that. Again, I would have, like, you know, the kind of dehumanization that Chesney does to treat them like this, because he just doesn't see them as people. He sees, Ice Willow says, he literally says, these aren't really people, they're nothing without me. Like, bro, what? So, like, again, that's something that could have gone into it. Another really, going back to Umbru and Ansher, Dirk later thinks, Umru, that later, at the same time that Ansher had appeared to them, Umru had died of a heart attack, but he died with a smile on his lips.
An ecstatic smile.
And so he likes to think that he saw Ansher one last time.
Because Dirk originally is like, man, I wish Umru had been here so he could have seen this. And then he later learns about how he died, and he thinks, oh, he did. And it is just such a beautiful moment, because like Umru gets the thing that he wanted, that he no longer thought he deserved. The one person who had been actively asking for his god to appear, but not asking the right question. So it's just this really lovely, like, little bow on that. And then Scales basically says, so they get rid of Chesney and all that, the celebrations. They start, another great detail. The gods are like, and we have chosen, because somebody needs to, for the next 40 years, spearhead kind of writing the world. And we pick Karita. And she's like, and how long will this take? And he's like, at least 40 years. And she immediately, like, because she was looking real tired and withered and stuff like that, and immediately is just smiling at being assured an even longer, because she's already old AF.
Already old.
Like, old, longer life. And she just looks healthy. Like, and not that she looks different, she just looks like she has more energy all of a sudden. Because she's like, I got 40 more years in me, baby. And it's just this great detail. But Scales calls Kit and Blade. And he's like, listen, I really like the valley next to your home, and I'm going to be living there for the next 10 years. And during that time, I will teach you both magic. And they're like, wow, you really, like, why would you do that? And he was like, because I really did not like watching you dance around in that Coliseum arena when you have all the power to be able to have gotten yourself out of that situation. And they were like, we'll take it.
And then one thing we haven't mentioned is throughout the book, Dirk, whenever he's stressed out, will start sketching up plans for new animals. And he's like, okay, what about ants that could cause diseases by going between people's toes? No, that's dumb. What if I did carrier pigeons, but their brains are too heavy? Yeah. And so like all this stuff. And then so at the last minute, mermaids, but that would be expensive because of the pool. So the last moment in the book is him and I think Mara are like hugging or something like that. Yeah. And he's like, what about a sea person? As a child, was it?
No. He goes, Mara, how would you feel if we had a human child with wings? And she goes, what? And she goes, I guess. Why not? And that's how the book ends. Yeah. That is literally it.
It's great too, because you're like, that plot line is resumed. You also get the sense that like Mara actually is into Dirk's weird like hobby, and so that's the book. I love it deeply. One thing we didn't mention is there's a great arc essentially with Kit, because Kit had to learn how ugly killing was after he had been playing just general for so long, when he actually had to go in and kill. And so it's like those things where it's like there's a lot of balls in the air in terms of character arcs and elements and like Chekhov's guns, and they all land. And they're all great. It's such a good book. It's disappointing people don't really remember it now.
Yeah. And so I hope, if anything, what this podcast episode video does is gets people to go read this book, because it is fun. It is hysterically funny. It has one really weird moment that, please be aware of going into. But it is just a joy to read. Angry Otter says, I just told my 3-year-old I'm gonna glue some feathers to her and call her a griffin. She can thank Diana Wynn Jones for her childhood trauma later.
Really funny. I mean, honestly, an otter griffin would be super cool.
It would be. And it's such a fun and easy book. Again, it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. I think people who like to be really close to one particular character really feel their feels, and like, or people who like a darker story.
Does have an impact on you, though. It's not as though you're fully disconnected from it, especially certain moments. Like
when the family all reunited, I was verklempt. Like I just was so happy that they're all together and like they're home. And I love Dirk for being like, I'm not doing it. Like he just stops doing any.
And the thing is, like, yeah, there's so many great moments, and I think again maybe it could have been more incisive in terms of certain like social metaphors that it could
John could have had a better arc.
Or just not existed, because again, it's hard to keep track of 5 griffins, or 4 is a more manageable number. And so yeah, there is a sequel to it called The Year of the Griffin, but it's a cute book, but it's nowhere near as good as this one in terms of what it's trying to do. Blade makes a return, one of the griffins makes a return, but that's basically it. It's not like examining what this world would be like after it had been stuck as a tourist trap for so long. It's literally just like a different adventure in this story, essentially, which is disappointing. It's cute if you want to read it, but it doesn't really follow on from this one particularly well.
I haven't read it.
Need more Diana Wynn Jones, guys, because she is my favorite author, and I read all of her bibliography at one point. And these videos will probably do poorly because they're such old books, but I don't care. They're so good.
They're so good. I'm really excited to do a dive into the older echelon of
I told Maria, I was mentioning, we were talking about how much family is important, and I'm like, yeah, the only one that isn't very family oriented is the one where the son becomes a dog because the moon cheated on him. And that's actually an accurate depiction of the book Dog's Body. Unfortunately, that one doesn't have an audiobook, so we probably won't be able to read it. But
it has a family. He said that at first, and then he goes, "Nope, never mind. I forgot it does have a very
there is a strong family, dynamic involved in it. So yeah, if you guys have read any Diana Wynn Jones books, comment which ones you would like us to read. I think they're really great. If you haven't, did this one make you want to read Lord of Derkholm? It's fantastic. Literally just one of my favorite books. Then and now, and good for all ages except for that one scene. And again, it's not even graphic. It's just like, why is that there? Anyway, do you guys have any last thoughts in the chat? Because this took a little bit longer than I thought, but it's just such a fun book to go through. And there's so many moments that I just love.
It really is. Please read it. Just do it. We do have to go, though, because I have an appointment to get my nails done with my mom's, and we're about half an hour late, but I could not and would not cut this
literature. Hey, we're here for you guys. Join our Patreon. Also, importantly, Max says the final cat count was 6. So good to know.
8.
All right. Oh, 8. Man, I really do have dyscalculia. I do this all the time. 8. Okay. We will talk to you all later. Our lovely darlings.
Bye, guys.